Chapter 712. Xu Rui didn't have thought steal, so she couldn't hear Lu Cheng's unspoken criticism. Her dimples deepened as she laughed at Lu Cheng's words. You're humorous as usual. She didn't ask questions like really? Or who? In case Lu Cheng couldn't answer. It would be a grave sin if it caused a conflict between the two mighty ones. At this moment, the boss came over with his signature salted crispy chicken and other dishes. He glanced at the cameras, lights, and other equipment and smiled like a blooming flower. Not only was the food generous, but he was also very attentive. Xu Rui finally managed to get rid of him. She smiled at Lu Cheng and said, "You can ask him for advertising fees later. He's recommended by the heavenly son of the era and the future titled Mighty One. You make it sound like a food show." Lu Cheng picked up his chopsticks and picked up a piece of salted crispy chicken. Xu Rui smiled. Her thoughts wandered. When our show airs, you'll probably be specially hired as a gourmet. Well, when you get the title of king, you'll probably be the food king. Lu Cheng subconsciously made a self-deprecating remark. Is this my title of king? If I meet someone who likes to mix 2 and 3 tones, wouldn't I become the king of sh*t? Don't talk about this at dinner. Xu Rui's mouth twitched. Then she said excitedly, "You said it yourself. I believe people nowadays don't lack the spirit for pranks. When the show airs, this title will follow you closely." Trouble comes from the mouth. Lu Cheng almost gasped. He quickly asked, "Can you cut this part?" "Oh." Xu Rui pretended to be hesitant. "If you insist." If she really ignored the wishes of a physical invulnerability expert, the TV station building might be flattened one day. "I insist," Lu Cheng answered without hesitation. "All right." Xu Rui's eyes lit up. She took a small bite of the meat and said with great interest, "Have you ever thought about the title of king? I've seen a lot of discussions online. They all say that since the sky-shaking roar is a divine beast, you can be called the king of beasts. Can't you just use the first word?" Lu Cheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Images of slamming the table and the like flashed through his mind. How the hell am I like the Beast King? The Deity King was more like it. Speaking of which, I have a pretty good nickname among the foreign powerhouses. King of Calamity. Why couldn't the title of king be written in 4 words? Xu Rui resisted the urge to continue discussing this topic and returned the focus of the show to Lu Cheng. She began filming his daily life as if they didn't exist. She watched as he glanced at his phone from time to time while eating. Later on, I can add a sentence here. Dangerous habits that are not good for digestion. Children, please do not imitate them. For the next few days, the recording of the show went very smoothly. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the farewell scene. In front of the camera, Xu Rui reached out and shook Lu Cheng's hand. "Thank you so much for your cooperation this week. Sorry for bothering you." "Nothing," replied Lu Cheng politely. Well, finally, I've always wanted to ask you something. Lu Cheng, do you feel that your daily schedule is like that of a robot, running according to a fixed plan, precise, regular, and very, very restrained?" Xu Rui couldn't help but ask. Lu Cheng thought for a moment and said, "The path of physical invulnerability can't be walked without restraint." No. What I mean is, other than the daily training, the few physical invulnerability mighty ones I've come into contact with all have rich and varied spare time lives. As for you, well, it's not that the internet isn't interesting. It's just that even when you're playing games, reading novels, or browsing Weibo, you give people the feeling that you're restraining yourself and restraining your desires. You lack the expression of your emotions and the interaction of your social circle. Xu Rui's description wasn't accurate enough. In short, he wasn't lonely? Compared to when he was in university, he was more and more restrained and introverted. "It's all right. I usually interact with my teammates. As for friends, they're all over the place and not by my side," replied Lu Cheng with a smile. I seem to smell a faint sense of loss." "That's right. At the level of physical invulnerability, new friends are probably in the same social circle or at the same level. It's very rare, let alone in the same city." Xu Rui nodded thoughtfully. Then, her single dimple appeared. "Well, as you grow up, your friends will only get fewer and fewer. All right, that's the end of the program. Thank you again for your cooperation. Oh right, are you going to sign up for the Warrior Sage battle at the beginning of May? After the Master Battle, you haven't participated in any title matches. You've missed the King and Superclass matches consecutively. Lu Qing smiled and nodded slightly. I will. After conserving for so long, all that's left is the Warrior Sage battle. The National University Martial Arts competitions came to an end. Songqing University once again entered the top 4 and maintained their position in the circle. May 3rd in the villa at Xiaopei Lake. Lu Qing sat on the sofa with the big backpack beside him. He held the remote control in his hand and seemed to be waiting for something while watching a TV program idly. Welcome to the preview of the Warrior Sage battle. In the live broadcast room on the screen, the host and guest commentator He Xiaowei were talking about highlights from time to time. It's the beginning of May again. It's time for the new Warrior Sage battle. Xiaowei, I heard that the Martial Artist Association is planning a reform. They're going to change the 5 major title matches from annual to biannual and stagger them. Yeah, I heard the news. After all, there are more and more such matches and they're running out of time. Physical and vulnerability experts are also starting to selectively participate. It's better to increase the number of years and increase the value of the titles. The bald poison milk hierarch He Xiaowei replied with a smile. However, they'll only start in the year after next year at the earliest. Ever since he changed his Weibo name and shaved off all the hair on his head, he felt that his career was getting better and better. Recently, he had even become a special guest on one of the top 3 TV stations in the country. Valuable. That's a good word. The host took this opportunity to start the conversation. Speaking of valuable, among the 5 major titles, the earliest ones, Warrior Sage and King, are still the most valuable and valued. They're similar to ancient martial arts competitions, and each have a sense of history. Among them, the rules of the Warrior Sage battle are the simplest. It's a single elimination round to determine the mighty one who can challenge the previous Warrior Sage. Among them, the mighty one with a title will be seeded. The 16 Inhumans who won the first round and the preliminaries will fight as mentors. If there are less than 16 titled mighty ones, the physical and vulnerability experts will choose the martial artists closest to that level. Generally, it's based on performance in the past year. Some will age and some will regress. The rest of the physical and vulnerability experts will fight in pairs. In the second round, the titles won't touch. If there's a bye, the top 32 will be decided. After that, there will be no restrictions. After the host finished speaking, He Xiaowei continued. Excluding Warrior Sage, Qian Donglu, there are a total of 13 titled mighty ones who signed up this year. All of them are still active in professional competitions. As for the rest, most of them are old and cherishing their reputation, so they don't want to appear again. The 13 titled experts are Dragon King Qin Qitao, Kiran Dongbaxian, Supreme Class Ji Hai, Path Sword Wu Qiao, Queen of Thought Fei Dan, Divine Monk, Fa Yuan, Spear King Huang Ku, Empress Luo Ningzitong, God-slaying Saber Lu Yongyuan, Heaven's Equal Sword Feng Ji, Long Dam that protects the sea Ma Xinghong, and Lion King Shang Yud. The physical and vulnerability experts chose the ones with the best performances last year, who are closest to this level, but don't have a title yet, are Living Buddha Shan, Evening Light Liang Yifan, and the clown Gu Jianxi. Speaking of which, I'm impressed. The clown has displayed the strength and drive to compete for titles in the past year. He even made Spear King Old Man go crazy. This means that the Wuyue Club has 2 superclass mighty ones. They're no longer in the middle of the pack. It's a pity that both Deadly Chill Xi and Xiaoye and Black and White Divine Saber Shi Yuejian are still lacking. If only Lu Qing had stayed back then, they would have been qualified to compete with Daxing Temple and Shushan Study for the top 3. The host listened quietly and chuckled. I don't know if you're praising the Wuyue Club or feeling sorry for them. I don't think they want to be praised by me, said He Xiaowei in an open-minded manner, as though he had already accepted his fate. That's right. Everyone knows the name of Toxic Healer. The host didn't tease him any further and returned to the topic. These are the official 16 seeds. Next are the 8 challengers that our TV station and our program team have selected. They are the 8 most promising mighty ones to win the right to challenge for the Warrior Sage title. Regardless of their age, they have all displayed enough strength in the past 12 months. Next, let's look at the big screen. First, Dragon King. Without a doubt, he's the Dragon King. As one of the legendary twins and the winner of 18 titles, does he need any other reason? Second, Kirin Dongbashian. His claim to be one of the top 3 is gaining more and more recognition. However, his focus is probably on defending the title of Kirin. Third, Supreme Class Zhihai. He's the most popular young mighty one in the past 3 years. He has already won 2 titles, and is currently in good condition. He's looking forward to a breakthrough. Fourth, Taoist Sword Wu Qiao. His contemporaries, Divine Monk Fa Yuan, and the rest have all started to decline. He's the only one who's still at his peak. It's rare. He's a strong contender in every title battle. Furthermore, even now, he's ranked in the top 3 in terms of the number of titles he's won. Fifth, God-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan. He created his own saber technique and improved further. His standard is obvious to all. He still has the habit of failing miserably in unexpected situations, but please believe in his performance when facing strong opponents. Sixth, Heaven's Equal Sword Feng Ji. As the number 1 mighty one in Kongtong School, his physical invulnerability career overlaps with that of Dragon King and Warrior Sage. He's firmly suppressed by them and his strength is always underestimated. However, even so, he still managed to win the title of Master once in the past 10 years. He's currently at the peak of the 3 tiers of physical invulnerability, mental strength, and experience. Seventh, Late Bloomer Liang Yifan. He's a mighty one who's slowly matured. In the past 10 title battles, he's entered the top 4 times and won the right to challenge once. He's getting closer and closer to winning the first title. Eighth, Clown Gu Jianxi. His growth rate is astonishing. He entered the Supreme Class round-robin competition at the beginning of the year, and was immediately designated as first pin. Almost everyone believes that it's only a matter of time before he wins the title. These 8 are the mighty ones among the mighty ones in this battle of Warrior Sage. At this point, Lu Cheng received a message. He switched off the TV with a click of his finger. Then he picked up his luggage and typed with one hand. "Let's go." Clang. The door of the villa opened and closed. Lu Cheng strode out. Chapter 713. In Lu Cheng's fan forum. I have a feeling that Senior can go one step further and enter the top 8. Eternal Nightfall, Yin Shaoling said aggressively. What a coincidence. I have the same feeling. Brahman chimed in with a handshake. Unparalleled Dragon King said. You two are starting to lose your luck so early. This is not like the Master Battle, where the early stage is a double elimination system. There is still room for recovery if you lose one round. If you really get a strong opponent, it's not surprising that you get eliminated in the first round. Accumulating your luck is very important. Bull Demon King replied. A plumber eating mushroom analyzed. This round is still okay. There are a lot of weak opponents, so the probability of getting a strong opponent is lower. From the second round onwards, it will be a battle of luck. I suddenly realized that luck is very important. All the good names are taken by dogs, replied. I was wrong. I admit my mistake. Yen Shaoling had never cared about things like face, so she quickly changed the topic. Then let's talk about Senior's future title of king. He's always said that his martial arts are cosmic universe style. So how about King of Time? No, I thought it was that King Zhou. Then let's call him King of Stars. King of the Stars, what a nice name. What King of Gorillas? Okamoto's fan asked. Road to the Arena laughed. What King of Cinder? I'll spread it. Is that not enough? You guys are too much. Every word has a bunch of homophones. Don't bother about the details. It's unavoidable. Just like Dragon King. Isn't it easy to mistake it as Deaf King? Yen Shaoling said. After this, the forum suddenly quieted down. No one replied for a full minute, making Yen Shaoling anxious and uneasy. Where is he? She couldn't help but ask. Little Nightfall, don't go out these days. You'll get beaten easily. Brahman said. Yen Shaoling said. I'll delete it, I'll delete it, okay? May 11th, Hushi City. On the eve of the draw for the second round of the Warrior Sage battle, Lu Cheng sat cross-legged on the bed, watching the hotel TV, while chatting on QQ. In the first round, he drew Go, one of the Black Tortoise school, who had advanced in the same year. This did not mean that Go-Wen was weak. As the leader of the new generation of the Black Tortoise sect, she did not practice the unique skills of the Water sect or the Black Tortoise True Sword. Because she was from the Miao tribe and had a talent for witchcraft, she had chosen the incomplete chapters of the Plague sect that were kept by the sect. Regardless of whether it was the Plague emissary that filled the surroundings with viruses and other substances to weaken the enemy, the 5 plagues poison palm that was fatal in every move, or the 9th move, Emperor Lu's finger, Scorpion swings its tail, she had mastered all of them and was close to the second order. Unfortunately, her opponent was Lu Cheng. The Infernal Inferno of the Fire sect could minimize the effects of Plague Emissary. The cannon attack, of 9 rotations of 5 flames, also made it difficult for the Plague sect to perform many of the unique skills they needed to learn. In the end, she was defeated helplessly. Of course, this wasn't just because of their styles. More importantly, Lu Cheng's strength was more than half a level higher than hers. After replying to Little Fairy, Lu Cheng switched to the group chat and saw Runli popping up. Let's continue the bet. Let's see who can last until the end. The winner will treat us to a meal. You seem to be brooding over the previous result. Lu Cheng chuckled to himself. It was as though he could see Runli's unconvinced expression. He replied concisely, "Sure. I'm fine with it." Peng Liyun followed. And Chaoyang sighed deeply and said, "I can only wait for next year." He had placed first in the preliminaries of the Warrior Sage battle, and had entered the main competition. In the first round he had drawn Dragon King, and received guidance. However, what he meant by next year was, at this time next year, I should also be a physical invulnerability expert. Just as he finished his sentence, the lot drawing officially began. There would be a few buys in this round, but Lu Cheng was unlucky to hear his name first. Longhu Lu Cheng. I wonder who it will be. Lu Cheng cast his gaze towards the television screen. A few seconds later, the guest took out another ball and laughed. Haiyuan Longzhen. He was once the second leading player of the Longhu Club. He was close to a superclass mighty one. Damn, what a coincidence. Lu Cheng picked up his phone and pressed on the virtual keyboard. Just as he was about to send a message to his wife, he saw Ku send a dumbfounded emoji. It's true. Enemies are bound to meet. But his enemy is Dragon King. Smiling with tears expression, Lu Cheng replied. Yen Zhika replied, looking up at the sky expression. In essence, it's you. You're taking his place. It's inevitable that everyone will compare you to him. That's true. Lu Cheng felt an inexplicable sense of anticipation. In the internal team practice last year, I didn't even win against Longzhen once. In the hotel where the Haiyuan Club was staying, Longzhen, who was more than 2 meters tall, was sitting on the sofa. He didn't even look at the television, and was slowly burning a cigar. Around him, which Qianhui was sitting beside him, Cheetah Li Yuanqi was pacing back and forth with his hands behind his back, and Empty Nest Old Man, Wu Molian was smoking a cigar leisurely. From time to time, he would call his old friends to harass them. When the results of the first round were out, Qianhui, Li Yuanqi, and the rest turned their gazes towards Longzhen. However, they found that this bald, fierce-looking man didn't show any emotion. After leisurely enjoying his cigar, he smiled and said, "That's how small the world is." He looked around, leaned back, and said, "You're right. If I were to draw him at this time next year, I wouldn't dare to guarantee it." He took another puff of his cigar, and exhaled a cloud of smoke. As for now, yeah. You're the one who wants to challenge the Dragon King. How could you be stopped by Lu Cheng? Wu Molian laughed heartily. Longzhen didn't say anything else. He laughed and continued to enjoy his cigar. After that, there were quite a few matches between the strong. However, due to the principle of avoiding seeds, there was a lack of classic matches. When it ended, there were a few who got a bye and directly entered the top 32, including Morningstar, Renli, and a sect leader of the Shangqing sect. This made Lu Cheng and Peng Liyun dumbfounded. They deeply felt the difference between the lucky ones and the unlucky ones. The next afternoon in the Immensity Desert. In a dark, barren land, surrounded by weathered stone pillars, it didn't look like the work of nature. It looked more like the work of man. This was the venue and spectator seats of the warrior sage battle. Of course, these stone pillars were quite a distance away from the desert to prevent damage from the aftershocks. There were also experts from the Martial Artist Association patrolling the area. As the contestant for the first match, Lu Qing came out of his tent, locker room early. He passed his phone and other belongings to Amen. Braving the scorching desert wind, he walked step by step to the center of the arena. Opposite him, Long Zhen was like half a metal tower. His steps were steady and his body heavy as he walked over. He was wearing a loose sky blue martial arts suit. Just his appearance alone was enough to make people feel pressured. Stopping at the predetermined spot, Long Zhen looked at Lu Qing and smiled. This isn't a team practice. I'll give it my all. P.S. Recommend a book, The Perfect Future of Rebirth. I guarantee the quality of a novel. However, who gave him the courage to ask me for a recommendation? Isn't he afraid of death? Chapter 7:14. Just in time, Lu Qing replied with a smile. It's exactly because it's not a team practice that I'm looking forward to it. Amidst the sandstorm, the referee raised his right hand, exhaled, and announced, "Talk time begins." Long Zhen didn't say anything. He lowered his back and assumed a horse stance. Light gathered in his eyes as he looked at Lu Qing. The temperature around them rose steadily. Lu Qing didn't back down. His will was strong and his aura was strong. The purple light in his eyes flickered as though he was an ancient emperor standing tall. Bam bam bam. Where their gazes met, the dry air was ignited one after another. Even though the wind was howling and the flames flickered, they didn't extinguish. It was as though they were being supported by self-spewing oil. Bam bam bam. The pure desert was engulfed by the red flames. The referee slowed his breathing to prevent his airway from being damaged by the high temperature. He quickly left the center and ran to the edge. Looking at this legendary scene, Yan Zheke and the rest in front of the screen felt their hearts skip a beat. They could feel the tension of the impending battle. As the atmosphere clashed, Lu Qing slowly and solemnly formed the 5 flames. Faint purple, blazing white, golden light blue, and red circled around him as though he was escorting a deity. Long Zhen, who also practiced the unique skills of the fire sect, didn't follow suit. The power of his 9 rotations of 5 flames. Descent of the Sun might be slightly better than Lu Cheng's, but he had his own strengths and weaknesses. He couldn't do it as easily as Lu Qing and maintain it for long. To him, the 5 flames were extremely mentally draining and burdensome. It could only be used in close combat. While attacking the enemy, he would form a fireball. It was equivalent to accumulating qi with every punch before unleashing his ultimate move. If he were to learn from Lu Qing and prepare from the start, he would end up drawing a tiger, but end up drawing a dog instead. Among the current physical invulnerability experts, the cosmic universe style was the only one. Seeing that the fire was spreading and that the entire desert was about to blossom with a crimson lotus, the referee waved his arm and shouted, "Stop! Begin!" Whoosh! Long Zhen instantly formed a golden fireball and shot it at Lu Qing from afar. Among the 5 flames circling around Lu Qing, a faint purple flame flashed across the sky like a meteor. Just as the 2 fireballs were about to collide, Long Zhen's golden ball suddenly split into 2. One went down while the other went up. One stuck close to the bottom of the ball of purple, while the other leaped over the obstacle and headed straight for the target. The second style of the fire sect, golden godly fire. Only when it was propelled by fire force could it unleash its full power. It was adept at changing its trajectory, gathering and dispersing at will. Long Zhen's main cultivation was fire force. However, Lu Cheng's faint purple was unusually heavy. Everything around it slowed down as though it was being pulled by it. As a result, Golden Gold, who was trying to leap over the obstacle, was exhausted. It was as though he was a high jumper who had been running to the toilet all night. Emperor Yen Force, the sovereign of flames, could affect all flames. Rumble! The descending golden ball brushed past the faint purple ball, and both fell into an unstable state before exploding. The flames expanded and rolled, engulfing the golden ball that couldn't overtake in time and triggering it. Rumble. Long Zhen, who was testing the waters, stretched his body and took a step forward. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The hurricane that swept across the desert grew bigger and filled Lu Cheng's ears. The flames grew stronger and stronger, mixed with the golden red. It was as though a prairie fire was about to be set ablaze. At this moment, it was as though Long Zhen had melded into the flames and hidden in the wind. Lu Cheng, who was standing high above with his ice heart, could only vaguely sense him. He couldn't accurately predict which direction he would attack from. He looked like he wanted to fight head-on and live up to his image. However, in reality, he was trying to trick Lu Cheng into blindly combining the 5 flames. Fire sect movement technique, 6th style. Wheels of wind and fire. Whoosh. Long Zhen closed the distance quickly. He suddenly appeared from the flames and leaped out from the wind. His huge and terrifying body leaned to one side, bending his back and slamming into Lu Cheng's left side at high speed. The surface of his body ignited from the friction. Red and golden, he controlled it at will. Before he even got close, his pure strength was suffocating. Lu Cheng had a premonition and sensed the danger. With a twist of his waist, he half-turned his body, raised his left arm, and smashed down with his fist. As the punch was thrown, the 5 flames, red, light blue, and faint purple, circled closer and were about to converge. Many in the audience had already closed their eyes to avoid the glaring light of the descent of the sun. At this moment, Long Zhen's temples suddenly bulged. His speed of slamming into Lu Cheng increased, leaving behind faint afterimages as he closed in on Lu Cheng's body before the punch landed. Simplified attainment formula. As a physical invulnerability expert in the military, he had been accumulating merit points to exchange for the 9 words formula ever since he gathered them. Due to the fact that the mastermind behind Haiyuan wanted to show off in front of Longhu, this matter had been kept a secret. Long Zhen had also restrained his urge to use it in the recent arena battles. He wanted to give the Dragon King a surprise in the Warrior Sage battle. Who would have thought that he would meet Lu Cheng in advance? Even though he didn't say it out loud, he felt that he shouldn't care. However, it was a fact that Lu Cheng had taken over his original position. As long as they fought, there would always be nosy people comparing the two of them. If he lost or won with great difficulty, it wasn't hard to imagine what others would say. The prideful Long Zhen wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. Therefore, not only did he want to win, he wanted to win beautifully and cleanly. Based on this mentality, he planned to use one of his trump cards against the Dragon King on Lu Cheng. That was to fake the activation and use the simplified attainment formula to accelerate the second stage without warning at the critical moment, snatching the moment when the 5 flames were about to converge. At this moment, his opponent's fist had yet to hit him, and the great sun had yet to descend. He would be able to break through his defense and complete the fatal attack. Furthermore, as the 5 flames were about to converge, Lu Cheng's attention was focused, and he couldn't multitask. He couldn't detonate the flame force in his body, change directions strangely, or use the ice spirit to defend and counterfreeze. He couldn't dodge or defend even if he wanted to. When he succeeded in his attack and caused the 5 flames to lose control and explode, he could still grab hold of his opponent and use his body as a shield to block off most of the impact, causing him to suffer a second round of damage. Following which, he would release his Dan Qi and extend his limbs. While his opponent was down, he would take his life and complete the quick victory. Only those who had a deep understanding of the 9 rotations of 5 flames and possessed sufficient strength could come up with such a plan and seize that fleeting moment. Unfortunately, Long Zhen was one of them. His strongest point was his weakest point. At this moment, Lu Cheng felt as though everything around him had slowed down. The 5 flames were about to converge into the great sun. Long Zhen was closing in on him in slow motion, making it difficult to dodge and impossible to defend. The outcome was irreversible. In the blink of an eye, he made a prompt decision and gave up on controlling the 5 flames. His right arm, which was in front of him, swung like a spear and pushed outwards. His 5 fingers spread open and pressed on Long Zhen's shoulder. Like the most precise robot, Lu Cheng's mind was filled with every detail of his body. He adjusted his wriggling muscles, fascias, and organs without a single mistake. With a flick of his palm, his body was about to fly backwards to negate Long Zhen's innate strength and the terror of physical invulnerability. Bam! He was like a baseball that had been hit. His speed was so fast that the enemy's outstretched hand missed him. Uft! He spat out a mouthful of blood in midair. His right arm was fractured. No matter how hard he tried to negate the force, he couldn't completely negate it. Boom! The 5 flames went out of control prematurely. Lights of various colors shot out together with a mushroom cloud. After the collision, Long Zhen wasn't able to grab Lu Qing in time. He had no choice but to give chase and escape from the core of the explosion. Even so, he was affected by the shock waves and looked rather pathetic. Lu Qing landed on his feet and immediately turned to adjust his breathing. He knew that his opponent had most likely mastered the attainment formula. As for the other 9 words formula, he had to be on guard. He wasn't surprised or angry. Instead, he was delighted. If it was any other competition, no matter how confident he was, he had to admit that he only had a 30 to 40% chance of winning against Long Zhen. However, if it was a competition of the 9 words formula, he didn't believe that Long Zhen would be able to stack the 9 words formula while using force concentration at the same time. Only the Lu couple knew about the Cosmic Universe sect. Even if others knew a thing or two, they wouldn't be able to see the whole picture. Misfortune can be a blessing in disguise. Then I'll create an opportunity for him to compete with the 9 words formula. Whoosh! Lu Qing whipped up a blizzard and circled towards Long Zhen. Chapter 7:15. The wind howled and the feathers fluttered, clouding Lu Cheng's vision, hearing, and spirit. Lu Cheng was like the embodiment of the wind and the cold. He was indistinguishable from his surroundings. Just as everyone thought he was using this opportunity to adjust his condition and heal his injuries, the wind and snow parted. Light blue flames shot out from his back and feet. He charged towards Long Zhen, the Optimus Prime. His fist was in front of him, as though he was about to break through the air barrier. As the afterimage lengthened, Lu Cheng's qi and blood circulated. His body was stimulated, and he stacked the simplified attainment formula. His speed increased again, and he appeared in front of Long Zhen like a ghost. His fist didn't have any special effects, just a layer of flames due to the friction. However, terrifying speed equaled power and destruction. The entire process took 2 seconds. The commentators didn't even have time to say anything. They only felt that Lu Cheng was giving Long Zhen a taste of his own medicine. If Long Zhen could use the second part of the attainment formula to accelerate, so could I. In fact, I could do it better and faster than you. Long Zhen wasn't surprised at all. Instead, there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. Long Zhen watched as the wind swept towards his face like a steel plate. His opponent appeared in front of him as though he had teleported. His fist was coming at him at an unbelievable speed. Long Zhen's body moved to the side without warning. He grasped the timing perfectly as though he had rehearsed this thousands of times. I know you know the 9 words formula. How could I not be prepared? I didn't secretly leave behind Fire Force to change direction, and change direction in time. Bam! Lu Cheng's fist hit Long Zhen's afterimage. The sound of air breaking could be heard, and a strong gust of wind swept up. Long Zhen didn't move too far. His muscles bulged and his back tensed. He turned around and grabbed with his right hand. Layers of golden light gathered into a single point. Bam! With the golden light in his palm, he clenched his fist and struck at his enemy. Lu Cheng's attack missed. He took advantage of the momentum and stepped forward. He retracted his left arm and swung it upwards like a dragon swinging its tail, hitting Long Zhen's fist. Bam! When the two collided, the golden light collapsed and spread out, covering Lu Cheng from head to toe like a human-shaped torch. The flames flowed on his clothes, the back of his hands and neck, the corners of his face, his eyelashes, and his hair. Lu Cheng had no choice but to close his eyes to avoid being hurt. The first move of the fire sect, prairie fire with a single spark. However, these flames seemed to have been tamed, and were unable to harm Lu Cheng for a while. They were quickly extinguished by the diffusing crystals and white frost. Long Zhen wouldn't let go of this opportunity. His burly body expanded as his danqi gushed out. His muscles bulged out like serpents. He looked down from above and smashed down with his fist. He was born with divine strength. Faced with such a scene, Lu Qing couldn't help but feel suffocated by the pure, domineering power. He stabbed out with a simplified fighting formula, and seemingly transformed into a giant in a hurry. He raised his arm to congeal flames to block the attack. Rumble! Faint purple and golden sparks flew everywhere. Lu Qing barely managed to stabilize himself, and didn't retreat half a step. However, Longzhen wasn't going to let him off easily. He swung his arms and started to punch Lu Qing crazily. Every move was filled with ferocious strength. This made Lu Qing tired of defending. Sometimes he would retreat, but it was hard for him to break free. He was firmly locked in by his opponent, and trapped in close combat. Bang bang bang. Amidst the sounds of collisions, golden and crimson fireballs gradually formed behind Longzhen's back. We can use the jargon of the game to express it. When the qi accumulates and the 5 flames appear, it will be time for him to use his ultimate move. Kai Zhongming, the live commentator, said in a low voice, trying to be funny. Lu Qing, who had been completely suppressed by Longzhen, knew that his opponent wouldn't necessarily wait for the 5 flames to gather. Once again he adjusted his muscles, fascia, and organs in a subtle and balanced manner. Bang! When their fists collided, Lu Qing's body was pulled back and he was sent flying. His injuries worsened. In midair, he ignited the fire force in his body, and made several turns in an attempt to evade. Seeing this, Longzhen smiled and took a big step forward. With the attainment formula as the surface and the fire virtue hidden, he was not only faster, but also more unpredictable than Lu Qing. He completely locked onto Lu Qing, not allowing the distance between them to widen. In this regard, Emperor Yin was no match for Fire Da. When he caught up with them, it would be time to combine the 5 flames and summon the arrival of the sun. At this moment, Lu Qing's center of gravity sank, and he stopped abruptly. He seemed to have made preparations in his escape. Or perhaps it was a hasty move to break free. He raised his right hand and clenched his fist. Dazzling darkness appeared in his palm. Tilting northwest, sinking southeast. This was a killer move that he had learned from the restriction sect. Just like Lu Yongyuan's eternal silence, half of it was used to affect one's mental state. When it was used at this critical moment, Longzhen's vision turned dark instantly. He could only see a jade-white palm pressing down on him, restraining the space and destroying everything. The 5 flames, which were maintained purely by mental strength, were obviously shaking and close to losing control. Longzhen had also studied the Clear Jade chapter, and had his own gains. However, he was currently in the midst of the 9 rotations of 5 flames and couldn't make any adjustments. It looked like he could only go with the flow and throw out fireballs. However, under the mental interference of the enemy, there was a high chance that the trajectory would be wrong, and he wouldn't be able to hit his target. If it were in the past, Longzhen would explode the 5 flames when they were still some distance away from each other. It would cover everything and block his opponent's attack. He would then take some damage and regroup. However, he had a better idea now. It was the complete 9 words formula that could weaken the enemy, strengthen himself, strengthen his mind, and break through suppression. As the thought flashed through his mind, Longzhen quickly outlined the complicated seal script of the 9 words formula. His hands formed the same complicated seal, preparing for a strange and incomprehensible sound. When he saw Longzhen forming the seal, Lu Qing retracted his qi and blood and stopped the move. He focused his mind and force on his lower abdomen. In the miniature universe, the stars moved. Dazzling and familiar ancient words were written one after another. Confrontation. Army. Fighting. Swordsman. Wholeness. Formation. Deference. Forwarding. Attainment. They appeared at the same time, as though they had always been hidden in the starry sky. When the 9 words formula came together, Lu Cheng's danqi gushed out. He pushed his palms forward and used the complete 9 words formula. With a hum, Longzhen's mind strangely fell back. The complicated seal script that was about to form collapsed and brought about a severe backlash. It was as though his head had been hit by a martial artist. It was so uncomfortable that he wanted to vomit blood. Lu Cheng had spent so much time and effort to create this opportunity. There was no reason for him to let it go. He took a big step forward and activated the fighting formula. He transformed into a giant with flames, undercurrents, and ice crystals. Holding a giant hammer, he threw a punch at his opponent. He had purposely let Long Zhen gain the upper hand in order to break down his guard and allow him to start condensing the 5 flames. Lu Cheng's tilting northwest, sinking southeast wasn't complete and couldn't complete it in time. It was purely a mental simulation to force Long Zhen to use the complete 9 words formula. Lu Cheng then relied on his advantage to get in front of Long Zhen and interrupt his preparation. Not only would Long Zhen receive negative effects, but he would also suffer a backlash. Bam! Lu Cheng punched downwards. Covered in a heavy faint purple, he pulled Long Zhen's 5 flames, which had lost control of his mind and was about to lose control, towards his opponent. Rumble! The raging flames engulfed both figures. The ice crystals on Lu Cheng's body shattered, and he was covered in wounds. However, he didn't care about the damage from the indiscriminate explosion. That was because compared to him, Long Zhen suffered a greater portion of the impact. Long Zhen's scalp was a mess of flesh and blood. He staggered backward with blood at the corners of his mouth and nose. The arm he used to block Lu Cheng's punch was trembling nonstop. Lu Cheng took a step forward with his left leg and closed in once again. Taking advantage of his opponent's dizziness and sluggishness, he adjusted his mind and body. He raised his right palm and held the miniature universe. He struck out the real tilting northwest, sinking southeast. Surrounded by darkness, Long Zhen saw that he couldn't avoid it. Ferocious, he activated the fighting formula and transformed into a giant that exceeded human limits. He threw a punch at Lu Cheng. Bam! Amidst the terrifying commotion, the turbulent airflow blocked his vision. Long Zhen, who wasn't in his best condition, felt that his opponent's punch was so exaggerated that it could crush him. His body felt heavy and his bones cracked. He was forced to shrink by more than a meter. The explosion had turned the surrounding desert into a crater. The surface of the ground had loosened, and Long Zhen fell in up to his waist. His qi and blood were churning as he spat out crimson liquid that ignited on its own. He wanted to break free but lacked the strength to do so. Bam! Lu Cheng spun around and pulled back his leg. His left leg tightened and pressed against Long Zhen's temple. His movements were elegant and beautiful. The two of them had exchanged blows for less than a minute. The referee was silent for 2 seconds. He raised his right hand and announced in a deep voice, "Lu Cheng wins." Chapter 7:16. What the F***ck? What just happened? Kai Zoming blurted out in a live stream. He couldn't hide his astonishment. He was worried that Lu Cheng's counterattack would be effective. He was worried that he could break free from Long Zhen's suppression and regroup. But in the blink of an eye, he ended the battle with just 2 punches and a kick. Wasn't there something missing in between? I wasn't actually watching the live stream, but the video highlights? From the moment Lu Cheng was about to use tilting northwest, sinking southeast, the entire process was cut out. Connecting to the end? This doesn't make sense at all. After a few seconds of silence, comments flooded the screen. They were all words such as dumbfounded, 10 dumbfounded, 100 dumbfounded, diagonal dumbfounded, and power function dumbfounded. I suspect I'm watching a fake match. Could it be that Lu Cheng has the supernatural ability to stop time and use the pause to complete the key to his comeback? Maybe Long Zhen was distracted. I often do that. No, I have to take a break. This is 2F*** magical and F*** exciting. Kai Zoming quickly collected his thoughts and said with a smile, "No matter what, Lu Cheng won the match. As his ex-roommate and ex-teammate, I'll maintain a neutral and objective attitude. I won't comment." Before he could finish his sentence, the bullet screen popped up one by one. F***ck, I underestimated you. I can't believe you didn't praise Lu Cheng. You didn't get carried away and celebrate. That's not your style. Without waiting for the audience to finish lamenting, Kai Zoming chuckled and said, "I'll give the right to comment to my partner. Next, let's welcome my partner, Little Ming the Talker." He coughed and lowered his voice. "Hello everyone. I'm Little Ming the Talker. In a battle between physical and vulnerability experts, there's almost no such thing as a quick victory, not to mention an expert who's publicly acknowledged to be the weaker one. And today Lu Qing did it. Ellipses appeared one after another. The audience was speechless. After a long while, they popped up one after another. The city is full of tricks. I'm going back to the countryside. You can do that? Host, I admire your shamelessness and all kinds of tricks. Are you going to perform a duet? While the self-proclaimed martial artists with extraordinary insight were discussing the key to Lu Cheng's victory, Empress Luo, Ning Zitong, stood at the entrance of the tent and sighed. After the accident and falling into a passive state, he figured out the whole story almost instantly and used that as an excuse to set up a trap. He led Long Zhen by the nose and led him into the trap step by step. Putting everything else aside, Lu Cheng's talent in battle and improvisation are already hard to come by. He can unleash 120% of his full strength. Lu Yan, who was beside him, habitually sang a different tune. It's mainly because of Long Zhen's mentality. He actually wanted to take down Lu Qing in one go. Even if the warrior sage was in his position, he wouldn't consider such a thing. At the end of his sentence, he silently added in his heart. Seizing the opportunity to turn the tables and defeat Long Zhen wasn't something that would come naturally. Lu Cheng's martial arts were getting more and more refined. Ning Zitong nodded her head gently and laughed. Long Zhen fell a little too hard this time. What do you think? She turned to look at the Dragon King, Chen Qitao, who was standing with his arms crossed. Chen Qitao replied expressionlessly, his mentality isn't right. His brain isn't good. If Long Zhen were to hear this, wouldn't he faint from anger? Ning Zitong almost laughed out loud. Yeah, the Dragon King had always been mean and vicious when it came to commenting on his enemies. However, he would never be long-winded to avoid affecting his dignified image. But then again, the last sentence made a lot of sense. Long Zhen didn't even think about where the 9 words formula came from, and who was the one who inherited it. When faced with Lu Cheng's constant retreat and passivity, didn't he pay more attention and raise his guard? Who gave him the courage to compete with the 9 words formula? Didn't he consider the possibility of being countered? Of course, a wrong mentality could lead to a deviation in thinking, blindly seeking victory and forgetting the small details. The Dragon King might be extremely concerned about winning and losing, but as long as he was in the arena and on the battlefield, his judgment wouldn't be affected by such emotions. The stronger the flame, the calmer the heart. Long Zhen, who was being commented on, stood in the desert in a daze. Half of his body was buried in the sand, and he had completely forgotten about leaping up. The voice of Lu Qing winds echoed in his ears. His mind was blank and filled with cold snowflakes. I lost? I lost to Lu Qing? And I lost so easily and so weakly. How is this possible? Why did this happen? He knew very well what the crux of victory was, but he couldn't understand why he would make such a mistake. He was even more resistant to the expected pointing and slandering comments. At this moment, he saw Lu Qing retract his leg and straighten his body. He heard him say calmly, "You were too hasty. Too hasty." As Long Zhen mulled over the words, Lu Qing turned around and walked to the edge of the arena. His right arm was trembling and swollen. In less than 10 seconds, it had cracked under Long Zhen's surprise. Although he took care of it afterward, it was impossible to avoid it completely in such an intense battle. His injury gradually worsened, and towards the end he couldn't care less. Enduring the pain, he used the realm of minute control to execute tilting heaven northwest, sinking earth southeast. Fortunately, such an injury would heal in about 2 days. It wouldn't affect the 3rd round, which was the round of 32 to 16. In the other tent, Empty Nest Elder, Wu Malian, looked into the distance with his hands behind his back. He shook his head and sighed. It's not a problem to target the Dragon King and the Warrior Sage. They are ambitious after all. However, if you only target them and look down on the other mighty ones, it's easy to slip up and let others take advantage of you. After today, the outside world will probably think that Lu Qing replacing Long Zhen is a good thing for the Longhu Club. It hasn't been long, and he has already achieved his first victory. Moreover, One has just been promoted and hasn't fully converted his potential into strength. The other has been famous for many years and is close to being fixed. As time passes, he will completely suppress Long Zhen. This isn't my opinion, but the inevitable public opinion. Whether Long Zhen can walk out of today's shadow and readjust his mentality is crucial to him. Heh. To be precise, at first pin, one's mentality directly affects one's potential. Those who succeed will continue to have hopes of catching up to the Dragon King and the Warrior Sage. Those who fail will be stuck at a bottleneck and will have to pay a higher price to break through. Cheetah Li Yuanqi, which Qian Hui and the rest listened in silence. The atmosphere in the tent was inexplicably heavy. After a long time, Qian Hui muttered to herself in confusion. Old Wu seems to be very familiar with this. With his back to her, Wu Maoyan froze and revealed a bitter smile. Ha 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 ha. Although I don't know how he won, it's good that he won. Hands on hips expression, said Yan Xiaoling in Lu Cheng's fan forum. Unparalleled Dragon King replied. Wiping cold sweat expression. Ever since Long Zhen reached first pin, no one has beaten him in speed, including the Dragon King and the Warrior Sage. Did Lu Qing eat spinach today? My idol is equal to miracles. Rolling around expression, said Brahmin. Amidst the commotion, Yan Xiaoling vented her joy to her heart's content and shared the headlines on Weibo and various major websites. An upset or a symbol? Lu Cheng's quick victory over Long Zhen is the biggest upset since the start of the Warrior Sage battle. Or does it symbolize that he has the ability to challenge the top 8? The wolf is here. The heavenly son who has created miracles in every pin is here. Top 8 or top 4? Long Zhen may have left because he had no choice. If he didn't, Lu Qing would have taken the second leading player position. Lu Qing had just finished bandaging his right arm and sharing the joy of victory with his little fairy when he received a message from his assistant, Amen. Mr. Lu, post-match interview. After locking the screen, Lu Qing walked out of the tent and saw a girl with long, thin eyes. Hello, what are your thoughts on your quick victory over Long Zhen? Asked the reporter after holding back for a long time. Lu Qing deliberated for a moment before replying. The main thing is that there was a problem with his mentality. The new thing he learned happened to be something I was familiar with, so I took advantage of that fleeting opportunity. New thing? Is it the 9 words formula? Asked the reporter. Yes, replied Lu Qing simply. The reporter paused for 2 seconds, then suddenly smiled brightly and asked, May I know what your goal is in this Warrior Sage battle? Lu Qing chuckled and said, You guys, if I set my goal too low, you'll think I'm hypocritical. If I set my goal too high, you'll think I'm arrogant. In any case, you'll find a reason to criticize me. No. The reporter laughed awkwardly and shook her head. Without waiting for her to finish, Lu Qing looked into the camera and laughed to himself. I want to stand on the final stage. Chapter 717. Hearing Lu Cheng's reply, the reporter got excited. She didn't expect him to be so cooperative. She was already imagining the chief editor's praise, the crazy popularity, the increase in her salary, and the promotion of her position. In just a few seconds, she had already thought of her opening speech when she took on the role of chief editor. The headline of the news, the headline would be, I'll fight to the end. Lu Qing officially challenges the superclass mighty ones. Lu Qing didn't have thought steal and couldn't hear the reporter's thoughts. However, he didn't care what would happen next. He quickly ended the interview and returned to the tent. While watching Dragon King fight, he chatted with Yan Zheka on his phone. What happened to keeping a low profile? Covering mouth and laughing expression. Yan Zheka was looking at the headlines and forum posts on Weibo. Lu Qing replied, snickering expression. How can I keep a low profile after defeating Long Zhen so quickly? That's true. Regardless of whether you said it or not, the other physical invulnerability experts would only be cautious and go all out when facing you. With this sentence, you can still hope that someone will fall for it. Nodding expression, Yan Zheka replied. That's just one aspect. The most important thing is to have a pure heart. Lu Qing stopped joking and explained to Yan Zheka seriously. If you want to challenge strong opponents and fight to the end but don't dare to say it out loud because you're afraid of public criticism and getting slapped in the face, to most people, this is humility, keeping a low profile, and having self-awareness. However, to physical invulnerability experts, it's not a pure heart. This will affect one's state and affect one's performance in battle. At our level, we have to consider every little bit of interference. Also, not daring to say it shows that you don't have confidence in yourself. Under such circumstances, how can you defeat strong opponents? Are you expecting them to make mistakes? After saying this sentence, I felt more relaxed and focused. In order not to get slapped in the face and mocked by others, I can only squeeze out every ounce of energy to fight for it. Unlike before, I could accept losing to a titled Mighty One or a superclass Mighty One as no one would say anything. Yin Zhika replied, rubbing chin expression. Isn't this what they mean by cutting off all means of retreat? Cheng, you're the best. It had been almost 3 years since they registered their marriage. Other than when they were in love, she was still too embarrassed to call him her husband. Haha, but I still have to overcome the impatience brought about by the pressure. I can't become the second Long Zhen. Coincidentally, enemy heart-freezing move is very good at such things. Lu Cheng explained to his wife, and also used this opportunity to clear his thoughts and find the hidden dangers. Following that, after 2 days of competition, the top 32 of the martial sage battle were all decided. Peng Liyun defeated Hu Shubai of the Yinjiao League and successfully entered the ranks. None of the 4 heavenly prides were eliminated. This made everyone feel that perhaps the future would truly be an era where they would compete for supremacy. Before the 2-day adjustment period, the drawing of lots for the duel was held as scheduled. Compared to the previous casual arrangement, the organizing committee had invited all 32 participants to the small banquet hall to participate in the ceremony. After a lively and impressive performance, the warrior sage, Qian Donglu, went up to the stage. With the help of the host, the first match was drawn. God-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan versus Lion King Shang Yud. A battle between 2 titled powerhouses. From the start of the top 32, sparks will fly in every match. And Chaoyang, who could only watch the live stream in the hotel, said in the group chat. At a glance, all of them are first pin, except for us. Peng Liyun added exaggeratedly. Lu Qing watched the drawing of lots with a serious expression. Glancing at his phone from the corner of his eye, he said with a smirk, "That's why I really want to draw you, the Taoist brand pushover." In response to his deliberate provocation, Peng Liyun replied casually, "What a coincidence, me too." After typing, his thoughts drifted away with this thought. For a moment, it was as if he was in a place with no one around. Until his own name sounded. Peng Liyun came back to his senses in a daze. He saw the highlights scrolling on the big screen, and finally stopped at a picture of him and his opponent. That opponent was Kiran Dongbaxian. He was stunned at first, then broke into laughter. He said in the group chat, "I feel that my luck in drawing lots has always been bad. It's okay. You'll meet him sooner or later." Renli comforted him in her unique way. Lu Cheng was about to speak when he saw the guest pick up the ball and call out his name. Hence, he patiently waited for his opponent to appear. After a dozen seconds, the guest smiled and showed the result to the crowd. Kongtong School Fengji. Heaven's equal swordsman Fengji. A physical invulnerability expert who had won a title in the past 3 years, the #1 expert in Kongtong School. He was recognized by all major TV stations and websites as one of the 8 powerhouses who had a chance of winning the challenge right. This is the difficulty of a nightmare, right from the start. Lu Qing mocked himself. He wasn't too affected by it. Just as Renli had said, since he had set his sights high, it was only a matter of time before he met a superclass expert of this level. This was a difficulty that he had to face. There was no way he could avoid it. At the edge of the seat next to Renli, the sturdy and slightly plump Fengji nodded thoughtfully. His right hand gently stroked the engraved hilt of his sword. His eyes shone with excitement. He was eager to give it a try. His hair was thin and showed signs of balding. Physical invulnerability experts had terrifying recovery and growth abilities. Given that they could regrow their teeth after losing all of them, This shouldn't be a problem. However, for some reason, Fengji couldn't cure his baldness. He gave off the feeling that he was aging prematurely. According to an anonymous reliable source in the Guanwei League, this was probably due to the conflict between his bloodline power and the essence of the Plague Sect, which had been infused with the unique skills of the Wind Sect, resulting in certain slight sequelae. In the Jianghu, there were two interesting rumors about Fengji. The first was that he went bald early, and the second was that he liked girls more than 10 years older than him. Some people suspected that the reason was that he had a crush on Run Li's master when he was young, his martial aunt, the glorious sword, Qi Ling. Of course, this didn't affect his status as a superclass expert. Shaking his head, Lu Cheng reported this to his little fairy. Then he sent a handshake emoji in the group chat. Taoist priest, we are truly brothers in distress. I don't have a brother like you, replied Peng Liyun concisely. Damn priest, you've learned how to ridicule me, replied Lu Cheng with a shocked expression. While they were discussing, Runli was also selected. Her opponent was the empty nest geezer, Wu Malian. To the physical invulnerability experts present, this was probably the easiest first pin expert to deal with. It wasn't that Wu Malian had deteriorated so much that the first pin was just a symbol. It was because he was nearing his 60s. When he fought once a week, the deterioration in his condition wouldn't be too obvious. However, with the frequency of one battle every 3 days, he had already fought twice in a row. The problem was obvious. No matter how glorious he was in the past, time wouldn't spare him. Of course, experts in the Forbidden Territory could deteriorate before they died. Runli, you actually have the supernatural ability of luck, right? Asked Lu Cheng with a dumbfounded expression. It was rare for Peng Liyun to agree with his opinion. I've felt that way for a long time. I'll prove myself. Runli had always been confident in her martial arts standards and her ability to recognize directions. Following which, she hesitated for a few seconds before reminding Lu Cheng. Senior brother Feng is very good. He's very good at things that I'm not good at. At this point, she felt that she was boosting his morale and diminishing her own. She quickly added, he might not be good at things that I'm good at. Although it was as good as not saying anything, Chihuahua was still a good friend. Lu Cheng thanked her with a smile, and watched as the lot drawing ceremony came to an end. In the last round, the new guest drew Dragon King, Chen Qitao. The host chuckled. There's only one left. The Dragon King's opponent is without a doubt. Following the procedure, he replaced the guest and reached into the box excitedly. After touching it, he touched it again and again. After touching it 3 times, his expression changed drastically. Why are there no more balls? Only 31 of them had been drawn? What went wrong in the middle? Well, it doesn't matter if there are no balls. After eliminating the previous 31, it's obvious who's left. Who is it? Who is it? Who is it? Broadcast accident. Broadcast accident. Beads of perspiration formed on his forehead. He turned to look at the guest and saw that he was at a loss. Following which he looked at the experts below and saw the abbot of Daxing Temple, Divine Monk Fa Yuan, sitting in the first row. His expression seems to be saying, I know what's going on but I won't say. While the host was feeling suspicious, he saw Dragon King's lips moving. Instantly a mellow, magnetic, and majestic voice rang in his ears. Wu Guang. Yes, yes, yes. I remember now. The host announced with tears in his eyes. Dragon King's opponent is the sect leader of Shangqing sect, Taoist Wu Guang. Chapter 718. 2 days later, in Jiuwen Stadium, Hushi City. This was a venue specially built for the Battle of the Warrior Sage. It had a history of several decades, and had only recently been renovated, increasing the number of spectator seats, and adding an additional layer of protection to the original foundation. The Bluestone Arena was more than 300 meters in length and width. Because it was often damaged and needed to be repaired, there were no traces of mottling. Only the exit of the fighter's passage on the left had a stone tablet. It contained the calligraphy of Old Master Lin Zhongxuan, who had called for the establishment of the professional competition, the Sage of Martial Arts. When the Warrior Sage battle entered the top 32, and the number of matches was reduced to the point where there was no need for additional venues. All the matches returned to this arena. It was nighttime. As the last of the 8 matches on the first day, Lu Qing didn't pay much attention to the previous matches. Instead, he went through his thoughts and insights from watching Feng Zhi's videos over and over again in his mind. He was focused and serious. Only when the penultimate match began did he stop everything, allowing his mind to relax and not be too tense. His gaze rested on the big screen in the waiting room. He saw Peng Liyun being suppressed by Qiren Dongbaxian. Peng Liyun was forced into a passive position. There were a few times when he tried his best to counterattack or use his movement techniques, but they were all fleeting like waves in a raging river. No wonder he's one of the top 3 in the world. Lu Qing muttered to himself, half laughing and half in awe. If he were in priest's shoes, he wouldn't be able to do better than Lu Qing. As he admired the battle, he picked up his phone and browsed through the news. Then he sent the title and link to Yenjika. Gold testing battle. You can't make it to the final stage with words. Lu Cheng's test is here. Make it if you're a superclass. Yenjika replied quickly, flipping table expression. Are you looking for excitement by reading this? I didn't tell you before. She was afraid that it would affect Lu Cheng's state of mind. Lu Cheng replied, snickering expression. I'm looking for excitement to increase the feeling of cutting off all means of retreat. That works. Dumbfounded expression, replied Yenjika. She thought of the pure heart and roughly understood the reason. She didn't ask any further and turned to encouragement. Not only do you have to fight to the death, but you also have to look down on your opponent strategically. You have to feel that your opponent is not as good as you. And you have to have the confidence to win. Apart from hair, I really can't think of any part where he is worse than me. Lu Qing joked deliberately. Who said so? Yenjika replied. You have a wife but he doesn't. That makes sense. Lu Qing almost burst out laughing. Then he remembered some gossip and shared it with Ku excitedly. Empress Luo mentioned something yesterday. She said that when Feng Zhi was still a professional 9th pin fighter, he went out with a few bad friends from his sect for the first time. He found an indecent clubhouse and shouted something. In the end, the others took a girl away while he took Mama Sang. When this happened, no one knew that Feng Zhi would become a superclass expert in the end. His gang of scoundrels had no intention of covering up for him at all. Instead, they treated it as a joke and spread it out. From then on, as his strength increased step by step, the news of his preferences became more and more widespread. Yenjika replied, I really couldn't tell from his appearance. You really can't judge a book by its cover. Feng Zhi looked honest and had a simple temperament. Coupled with his early balding, he was like an old farmer planting trees on Mount Kongtong. As they chatted, the match between Peng Liyun and Dongbaxian came to an end. Although Peng Liyun had come back from the brink of defeat again and again, which made people look at him in a new light, he still couldn't create a miracle in the end. Poor Taoist. After lamenting about his luck, Lu Qing said to Yenjika, I'm going to adjust my condition and make the final preparations. Okay, good luck, replied Yenjika immediately. Then, she bit her lips and added, if you can achieve your goal this time, I'll take it one day at a time. I'll listen to you. Lu Qing seemed to be able to picture Yenjika's current expression and appearance in his mind. He thought for a few seconds and replied half-jokingly with an emoji of snorting through nostrils. If I lose, it's definitely because of this encouragement that I can't calm down. So it's my fault? Yenjika was annoyed and amused at the same time. The couple didn't talk much. Lu Qing put down his phone and closed his eyes. He allowed his thoughts to calm down and form a nice heart. Little by little he adjusted his body condition. In another resting room, Feng Zhi stood in front of a mirror. Holding hair gel, he applied what little hair he had left and arranged it into the most suitable position. While doing this, his eyes were focused and his expression was solemn. Just like ancient swordsmen, they would always burn incense, fast, bathe, and clean their clothes before a duel. Devotion to the sword and importance to the enemy. After doing all this, Feng Zhi flicked his beige martial arts suit. Straightening his back, he slowly walked to the long table where the heaven's equal sword was placed. Reaching out his right hand, He grasped the scabbard and solemnly picked it up. Suddenly, a breeze blew around him. He turned around and looked at the door. Step by step, he walked towards it. 15 minutes later, the 8th round of the competition started. Lu Qing in his navy blue outfit and Feng Ji in his white robe appeared at the two ends of the bright road. They restrained their momentum and looked at each other calmly. They walked as usual in the venue that had been repaired urgently, and came to their predetermined positions on both sides of the referee. Without any delay, the talk time began. Feng Ji raised his left hand holding the scabbard and saluted. His movements were perfect, as though to him, drawing his sword in a competition was a sacred thing. When his opponent returned the salute, he didn't speak, as though he was clumsy with words. However, Lu Qing knew that Feng Ji was good at communicating in private situations. He didn't speak only because it was disrespectful to the sword. All mental confrontations and verbal provocations were disrespectful to the sword. Lu Qing didn't intend to provoke his opponent with his dark history. Who knows, Feng Ji might even be proud of it. He kept silent as well. Hiding his momentum, he let the flames of crimson, pale purple, and others form a balance and circle around him. The 3 minutes were quickly raised. The referee, who had retreated to the edge, raised his right hand and swung it down. Begin. Clang. The crisp sound of metal clashing reverberated. Feng Ji pulled out his long sword and slashed twice in front of him. It was as though he was drawing a cross on a piece of white paper. With 2 swishing sounds, 2 highly condensed green crescents as thin as cicadas' wings appeared. One in front and one behind. They intersected and tore through the air. Lu Qing didn't dodge. The golden fireball behind him turned and blasted out. The crescent-like sword radiance approached, splitting the fireball into 4 equal parts like a real sharp weapon. The sword penetrated through, but its momentum was only slightly reduced. At this moment, the golden fireball suddenly lost its balance and exploded on the spot. The wave swallowed the sword radiance as though it was still under control. After testing his moves, Feng Ji stomped his feet and pounced toward his opponent. The long sword in his hand slashed and slashed, creating streaks of lightning-fast cyan crescent moon, making the air light crisscrossing. Lu Qing turned and took a step forward, stirring up a strong wind. He dodged, blocked, dodged, and struck in an orderly manner. Amidst the green crescents, there was a flash of light. Feng Ji's long sword arrived abruptly, leaving behind a dragon-shaped hurricane that stirred up dust and the sound of close pursuit. Lu Qing had a premonition. He had already swung his arm diagonally at the heaven's equal sword. The 5 flames behind him spun faster, as though they were about to condense. But in the end he suppressed the urge to end the battle in one go. He believed that as a superclass expert, Feng Ji wouldn't leave such a huge opening. He wouldn't go head-on against the 9 rotations of 5 flames. Descent of the sun. He must have a backup plan hidden in this strike to provoke me into condensing the 5 flames. With a thought, Lu Qing stabilized his balance. He channeled all the ice force in his body into his fist, intending to use the lament of the Ice Queen to block the long sword. Just as the two were about to collide, the sword radiance suddenly dispersed, turning into a gust of wind that swept across the area. Feng Ji's figure was hidden within, making it difficult to discover him. The third move of the wind sect, rootless duckweed. This was both a unique skill for deflecting force and a secret technique for dodging. Whoosh! The wind entered his ears and cut his face like a knife. Lu Cheng's eyebrows twitched. He pulled his shoulder abruptly, turning his right fist into a claw, and brought it in front of his face. In the gust of wind, the tip of a sword with a metallic glow and a tiny cyan color stuck out silently, pointing at his forehead. But as he had predicted, it was as though he was walking into a trap. Bam! Lu Cheng's 5 fingers, which glowed black, broke the tiny cyan color around the tip of his opponent's sword. The cyan color was the wind formed by Lu Cheng's force, maintaining the balance of the long sword. As soon as it broke, the tip of the sword trembled, slightly changing its direction. It stuck close to the back of Lu Cheng's hand, and pierced towards his face. The cold feeling gave him goosebumps. Indefinite sword. Generations of mighty ones of the Kongtong school had developed a sword art based on the wind sect. It was said to be unpredictable. The essence of this sword art was that the wind force attached to it was not meant to hurt, but to protect the sword and maintain its balance. Once it came into contact with a strong external force, the wind force would immediately lose its balance and change the direction of the long sword, which was out of the enemy's expectation. As for where the sword would stab in the end, the user himself couldn't tell, so it was called indefinite sword. Lu Cheng's hair stood on end, as if a poisonous snake was slithering across his skin. But he didn't rush to dodge the long sword. He just tilted his head, tightened his muscles, swung his knee, and raised his left foot, turning his calf into a whip and lashing forward. Bam! He kicked the scabbard that was coming at his lower abdomen at some point. This was Feng Zhi's real killing move. Using indefinite sword to force the enemy into a panic, he would grab the scabbard and give a fatal blow. When the enemy had some understanding of the move and was prepared, he would be able to turn illusions into reality and reality into illusions, using indefinite sword as the main attack. Of course, there was no such thing as a perfect move in this world. Maintaining indefinite sword was difficult, and Feng Zhi couldn't divert his attention to stab the scabbard at the same time. He could only wait until the balance was broken, and the uncontrollable wind force automatically changed the direction of the sword tip. Only then could he free up his hands for the next step. This created the difference between before and after, leaving a gap. When Lu Cheng's flying leg hit the scabbard, white fog spread out around his palm, freezing the air silently and making it sparkle. He made the lament of the Ice Queen explode in the void. Layers of ice crystals stacked on top of each other. The inertia of the sword tip and the wind force gradually slowed down, making it more and more difficult for it to move. Whoosh! Failing to succeed in one move, Feng Zhi spread out again, turning into a black tornado that connected to the flickering lights of the heavenly dome. Under the dome of heaven, there were even cracked bricks. It was like a hurricane in a documentary. Lu Cheng was at the center of the tornado. He felt that the black winds that formed the tornado had a sharp edge, as though they were all derived from Feng Zhi's sword radiance and couldn't be underestimated. If I were to be enveloped by the tornado, I would definitely be sliced into pieces. Lu Cheng understood that this was a combination of his opponent's powerful mind and moves. First, he would confuse his opponent before slashing his body. The eighth move of the wind sect, Black Calamity, Sweeping Hurricane. What was more terrifying was that there was a faint stench of blood drifting in the wind, slowly corroding Lu Cheng's body. At this moment, the best response was to blast out 5 flames and destroy the tornado with pure explosive waves, revealing Feng Zhi's spinning and slicing longsword. Lu Cheng did the same, but he purposely left the golden and light blue flames behind, combining the 3 flames into one. Bam! He punched out with his left fist. The light purple flames combined into one and expanded. The dazzling light tore through the darkness, turning the entire area white. The tumbling smoke disintegrated the tornado, creating countless turbulence. The huge explosion shook the earth, creating an obvious and wide pothole. In such an environment, Lu Cheng's clothes were fluttering, and his senses were at their lowest. But without thinking, he turned his body halfway, swung his right arm, and struck back. Clang! His fist accurately hit the longsword, piercing through the waves of fire and wind, knocking it back. This was partly due to his premonition of danger, and partly due to his judgment. When the 3 flames combined, the only place where he could still launch an attack was behind him, which was covered by his body. Since his sneak attack failed, Feng Zhi took a step back with a kick of his knee. Using the wind, he floated up as though he was weightless. Then, surrounded by the wind, he hovered in mid-air. At his level of mastery of the wind sect, he could fly for a period of time. This was also his advantage over most physical invulnerability experts. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Feng Zhi was like an eagle. With the strong wind as his wings, he swooped down. The long sword in his hand emitted streaks of green light. Sometimes he would hover high, rotate, and cut. Other times he would seal off his surroundings. During this process, even if there was no collision, he could use the wind to rise again. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Lu Cheng blocked, dodged, or used the remaining golden and light blue flames as the foundation to quickly form fireballs and shoot them at high altitudes. However, his counterattacks were all easily dodged by Feng Ji. His opponent's movements were smooth and nimble, even better than a bird's. Poof! After Lu Cheng threw out a light blue fireball, he was slightly slower in dodging. His back was slashed by 2 streaks of sword light. They broke through the ice and tore open a bloody wound. Poof! 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 For 3 whole minutes, without air control, he was like a trapped beast. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break free. More and more wounds appeared on his body. Failure was only a matter of time. Another 20 seconds passed. In midair, Feng Ji suddenly flipped upside down. Using his long sword as a drill, he created a terrifying tornado that was highly condensed. When the tornado fell on Lu Cheng, his sword bent, bounced up, and drifted into the distance. His flight was forcibly simulated by the windsek's force and unique skills. He couldn't maintain it for long. He had to rest for a while before he could continue. Of course, Feng Ji wasn't an idiot. He wouldn't wait until he was at the end of his rope before he took a breath. He would leave some room for accidents. He didn't want to stagnate in midair and fall to the slaughter. At this juncture, his eyes lit up. Ignoring the tornado that was sweeping towards him, he gathered his chi and blood, and directed the Dan force to his legs. Bam! With a bend and a push, the ground shattered. He soared into the air. Surrounded by golden, light purple and light blue flames, he pounced on Feng Ji like a cannonball. He had been holding on for a long time. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Every physical invulnerability expert knew that Feng Ji couldn't fly for long. However, other than the experts of the Shushan study who practiced the unique skills of the fighting sect, no one dared to take advantage of this. This was because his opponent wouldn't fall into his weakest state. Moreover, that was his territory. If he tried to take advantage of such an opportunity, he could easily go for wool and come home shorn, putting himself on the brink of defeat. While analyzing his opponent's battle highlights, Lu Cheng keenly sensed that this might be his only chance. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to defeat an opponent who was at his peak and had an insane advantage. This wasn't to say that Feng Ji would be careless or negligent. It was just that after a long period of enduring peacetime, he wouldn't be more cautious and careful when facing enemies other than the Shushan study. He wouldn't hold back depending on the opponent. Anyway, no one would try, right? This was his chance. I know how to fly for a short period of time too. Succeed or die trying. Launching a rocket, Lu Cheng closed the distance between him and his opponent. Seeing this, Feng Ji's eyes flickered. The wind around him blew, allowing him to drift away. He raised the sword in his hand and slashed at the enemy who was flying towards him. Bam! The Emperor Yan in Lu Cheng's body exploded. He turned in the air and dodged the green sword light. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Feng Ji's expression didn't change. He continued to turn and soar into the sky like an eagle. Bam bam. Lu Cheng followed suit and changed directions, closing the distance a little. The wind howled as Feng Ji flew up, hanging by a wire. The heaven's equal sword in his hand shone brightly as he chased after the enemy who had exhausted his momentum and was about to fall. At this moment, light blue flames gushed out from under Lu Cheng's feet. They burned through his shoes and lifted him up again. Jet counterattack, a rocket in the air. Feng Ji's eyes turned cold. Half of the green wind around him disintegrated and whizzed downwards. Boom! With a sudden explosion, the golden fireball that Lu Cheng hadn't been willing to use exploded. It turned into a violent gust of wind, injuring Feng Ji's back and pushing him forward. Feng Ji's pupils shrank. He disintegrated the rest of the green wind, moved horizontally, and slashed out a sword light. Boom! Boom! Light blue and light purple exploded one after another. One blocked the sword light, while the other helped to change directions. The tumbling cloud split open. Lu Cheng stepped out and finally closed in on Feng Ji. At this critical juncture, Feng Ji's martial arts suit suddenly swelled as though a gust of wind had formed within it. In an instant he rose up again. Just as the audience was sighing at Lu Cheng's exhausted moves, his body suddenly became light as though he was weightless. The flames under his feet burned freely, causing the cold to sink and the heat to rise. The ice spirit in his body was dark and empty, symbolizing the coldness of the universe. It was silence without substance. With a light step, Lu Cheng followed suit. He shook his left arm and threw a punch at Fengji. Fengji finally stopped changing directions. The long sword in his hand flashed as he slashed fiercely. His flight had reached its limit. Lu Qing cracked his knuckles and opened his fingers. He grabbed his opponent's sword and infused the accumulated ice spirit in his body into it. A layer of crystal formed and spread towards Fengji. At the same time, Lu Cheng's right hand grabbed the scabbard that his opponent was pulling at him. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. Both of them swung, kicked, and tapped their legs. They kept colliding and falling together. While falling, Lu Cheng and Fengji simultaneously used the simplified army formula and nature's wail to attack each other's minds. Both of them felt dizzy. Neither of them had the time to adjust and prepare for their big moves. But for Lu Cheng, this couldn't be better. As the power of ice spirit poured out, it affected Fengji's movements and counteracted the wind force in his body. On the other hand, due to the balance between ice and fire, the fire force in Lu Cheng's body gradually gathered and accumulated. Bam bam bam. Just as the two of them were about to land, Lu Cheng suddenly released his grip on his opponent's long sword and scabbard. Two heavy, faint purple fireballs drilled out. Boom. The fireballs exploded, injuring Fengji's body and throwing him a little higher. Lu Cheng, who had retracted his hand in time, used the recoil to land first. Without the time to adjust his breathing, he immediately formed a seal with his hands and exhaled. Formation. The airflow contracted instantly, imprisoning Fengji, who couldn't fly. He was at the end of his rope and couldn't break free in time. Bam! Lu Cheng gathered his breathing and blood, and leaped into the air again. He grabbed Fengji, who had just broken out of the cage, infused him with ice spirit, and slammed him to the ground. Boom! Amidst the dust, a crater appeared. Fengji lay in the middle, dizzy. Lu Cheng, who had been forced to catch his breath, fell to the ground and pressed his elbow against his throat. Clang! His heaven's equal sword landed at the edge of the crater, making a crisp sound. The referee raised his right hand and announced in a deep voice, "Lu Cheng wins." Chapter 719. Wow. In Lu Cheng's fan forum, that was all Yan Xiaoling could say before stopping abruptly in a daze. Immediately following that, everyone shouted the same words in unison. Superclass! 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 Xu Rui, who was filming the daily life of a physical invulnerability expert with Queen of Thought Fei Dan, was in a daze as she watched the match with her and listened to the cheers. He defeated Heaven's equal swordsman, Fengji, and entered the ranks of the superclass? As someone who had been working as a reporter for a few years, she knew that the news of Test the Gold and Breakthrough if you're a superclass were just media hype. In reality, no one had expected Lu Cheng to win. Putting aside the fact that he was a superclass, Fengji's ability to fly for a short period of time was enough to discourage any hope. Everyone was thinking of building up the hype and elevating Lu Cheng. Even if he lost unexpectedly, they could easily pick up where they left off after the match, creating a contrast and creating a wave of eye-catching criticism. In the end, Lu Cheng actually won. He defeated Fengji in his strongest field, aerial combat. This was simply enough to cause everyone's eyes to shatter. Of course, Xu Rui believed that the reporters would recover quickly. A miracle itself was the best gimmick, the best source material, and more effective than any other tricks. Phew, what did this guy eat growing up? It hasn't even been a year since he advanced to physical invulnerability. Xu Rui stuck her tongue out secretly, feeling like she didn't recognize the young man on the screen. She lowered her head and searched for the video of the program she made in the beginning on her phone. She watched one of the videos carefully and found it hard to believe that the dumb-looking passerby would grow into a freshly minted, super first-rate expert who was enjoying the cheers. Occasionally defeating Lu Yongyuan, Fengji, or Long Zhen at their peak wasn't enough to prove anything. However, to defeat three of them consecutively, one couldn't help but look at him in a different light. Fate is truly amazing. Xu Rui couldn't help but sigh softly. At this moment, the live stream of the passerby in the video was dark without any image. What the F***ck? What's going on? The commentator was too excited and couldn't think of a better way to brag about Lu Cheng, so he pretended that the power was cut off. I've seen this episode. The commentator traveled to another world. Actually, his expression is exactly the same as mine now. I'm in a daze and disbelief. After a few seconds, Kai Zhongming reappeared and laughed at himself. Damn it, I was too excited just now and accidentally touched the switch, causing the computer to restart. In the live broadcast room of the television station, the host and guest commentator He Xiaowei looked at each other, not knowing what to say. The director and the others were in the same state, and no one reminded them. Wow, Lu Cheng, is he really at the superclass level? After a while, the experienced host was the first to come back to his senses. He took a deep breath and asked hesitantly. He Xiaowei stroked his bald head and laughed. He might not be as good in other aspects, but when it comes to improvisation, he's really top-notch. He paused for a few seconds, deliberated, and said, actually the bigger problem in this match is Feng Zhi himself. With Long Zhun as an example, he seems to have been too cautious. After his initial attack failed, he immediately switched to flying to show his biggest advantage. This isn't a problem, but it also means that he gave up on his other strengths. When Lu Cheng took to the air to chase after him, he actually thought of using his flying advantage to escape. When his opponent was unexpectedly difficult to deal with, he finally fell into a temporary state of exhaustion. In close combat, his long sword was easily caught by his opponent. For a swordsman, this is the greatest form of self-humiliation. If it were me, I would choose to conserve my strength and wait for Lu Cheng to get close to me so that I could engage him in an aerial battle. At that time, I would be stronger with every inch of my strength. With my sword in hand and my outstanding swordsmanship, I wouldn't be afraid that I wouldn't be able to force Lu Cheng into a corner, and force him into a corner. The host listened in silence, pondered for a few seconds, and disagreed. If Feng Zhi had done that, Lu Cheng would have been able to conserve his remaining fireballs. Then it would have become a long-range exchange. The result is hard to say. That's true. He Xiaowei shook his head and said self-deprecatingly. In every post-match analysis, I always feel like I'm stronger than a physical invulnerability expert. Hindsight is always relatively easy. Hearing the referee's announcement, the heavily injured Lu Cheng finally heaved a sigh of relief. He retracted his elbow and stood up slowly. His body was trembling uncontrollably. This battle wasn't considered a long one, so it was normal for him to be exhausted. The reason why he felt so exhausted was because of the accumulation of sword wounds. It was the consequence of blowing himself up for the air battle. With such injuries, it would be difficult for him to recover fully in 2 to 3 days. This meant that Lu Cheng couldn't compete in the top 16 in his best condition. However, he didn't care too much about this. From the top 32 onwards, every match would be a fierce battle. This was fair to all fighters. When the time came, his opponent would most likely have some hidden injuries. Moreover, this was already set in stone. There was no need to worry about it. The most important thing now was to enjoy the victory. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Lu Cheng took 2 steps back and bowed to Feng Zhi, who was struggling to get up. He turned around with a smile and slowly walked away, surrounded by cheers. Feng Zhi took a deep breath and stared blankly at Lu Cheng's back. For a moment, he had the illusion that he was looking at the warrior sage. Since the establishment of professional competitions, only Qian Donglu had been able to achieve such a feat in his first year as a physical invulnerability expert. Now Lu Cheng had to be added to the list. In addition, Feng Zhi's greatest nemesis was also the warrior sage, Qian Donglu. In the domain of dark clouds and flashing lightning, flying was like being a target. Not to mention, he had a long metal sword in his hand. He was the so-called human lightning rod. Hopefully, this won't be a repeat. Feng Zhi retracted his gaze and bitterly walked to the edge of the crater. He picked up the heavens equal sword. Old buddy, it's been hard on you, he muttered to himself. When Lu Cheng returned to the resting room, his assistant and doctor were already waiting at the door. Boss, you're really. Almond couldn't find the words to describe it. She smiled brightly and gave him a thumbs up. Actually, it was very dangerous. Lu Cheng smiled and took the phone. He pushed the door open and entered. The doctor followed closely behind. Almond stayed outside. Taking off his tattered martial arts suit, he took a quick shower. While enduring the pain, he let the doctor disinfect and bandage his wounds. At the same time, he unlocked his phone and turned on the screen. He saw Ku's comment. Somehow it feels unreal. My brother Chung is unbelievable. Lu Chung replied in a carefree mood. Even I can't believe it myself. Although this is how I wanted to win before the match, when it really went according to plan until the end, it felt too smooth. There were no accidents at all. It doesn't seem real. Kua replied. Covering mouth and laughing expression, I've recovered. I've accepted this reality earlier than you. Hello, Demon King Chung. After that, she added. Crying face expression, when you won just now, I shouted out loud in the classroom. Luckily, class hasn't started yet. It's just that everyone is looking at me strangely. Touch, 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 so cute. It's a pity that I wasn't there and couldn't record this scene. Lu Qing consoled sincerely. However, what he got in return was Kuer's disdainful expression. After a while of chatting, Lu Qing put down his phone under the doctor's gaze. He extended his arms and bandaged them. After seeing him off, he continued to discuss the match with Ku. I realized that in a battle between physical and vulnerability experts, pure strength is the fundamental factor. However, it doesn't completely determine the outcome. Look, you caught Fengji's blind spot and defeated him in his strongest area. Kuer concluded thoughtfully. Yeah. Lu Qing thought for a moment before replying. For a physical invulnerability expert, when the difference in strength isn't enough to cause a qualitative change, it's very important to discover the opponent's problem and plan accordingly. After today, Fengji will definitely re-examine himself and make up for his mistakes. If I were to fight with him again, the outcome might be completely different. However, at that time, I might find a new problem with him. Of course, he might also find a problem with me. This is how unpredictable and interesting competitions are. Speaking of this, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration. From today onwards, not only do I have to watch my opponent's battle videos, I also have to review my previous matches and examine myself from the perspective of a bystander. I have to find my own problems. This was a part that he had neglected before. That makes sense. I'll look through it when I have the time. As the person involved, you won't be able to read it. Yenjika agreed enthusiastically. At this moment, Lu Qing sent an emoji of covering his face and sighing. Thinking back, I realized that my master had reminded me of this before. He said that I have to constantly examine myself to see if I have developed any bad habits or formed a fixed mindset. He used to do this when he was a professional 9th Pin Dan stage fighter. After that, it became less and less frequent. As expected of Coach Sure. Quick, call him and thank him. Kuer suggested. It's so awkward to suddenly call to thank him for something that happened a long time ago. Lu Qing replied. At this moment, Yenjika looked at the digital clock and said, I have to go to class. Yeah, I'm also going back to the hotel to examine myself. Lu Qing replied with a silly smile. Seeing this, Kuer replied with a blank expression. I suddenly feel that you might really achieve your goal this time. I'm starting to regret my previous promise. Lu Qing couldn't help but laugh. After chatting for a while, he stepped into the car that was specially used to return to the hotel. While sitting in the car lazily, he leisurely browsed through the reports and comments. Superclass in 1 year, even stronger than Wisdom King in the same year. Lu Qing, who is neither scientific nor martial arts. Confidence in the heart, power in the words. The future warrior sage or dragon king. During the break in class, Yenjika also browsed through these articles discreetly. When she saw the parts that made her happy and satisfied, she almost changed her posture to a more comfortable one. Luckily, she came to her senses in time. She quickly sat up straight and quietly looked around. When she saw that no one was looking, she put her phone back. Chapter 720. After the 8 matches on the second day, the top 16 of the Warrior Sage battle were decided. The organizing committee did a simple draw on the spot. The first matchup had the smell of gunpowder. Dragon King Chen Qitao vs Supreme Class Shi Hai. A battle between active title holders. One of the dominant twins facing a supernova, who was challenging his position. Phew. Wisdom King had won 2 one-on-one duels previously, and both were considered easy pickings. This time, I can see how big of a gap there is between him and Dragon King. Lu Cheng, who had ended the battle last night, didn't go to the venue. Instead, he sat in the hotel room and thought with great interest. Soon the second, third, and fourth matchups were announced. Long Dam that protects the sea, Ma Xinghong vs Kiran Dongbaxian. God-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan vs Queen of Thought Fei Dan. Morning Star, Runli vs graceful Luoxian. Can't. Lu Qing was once again dumbfounded. He deeply felt what it meant to have good luck, and to have bad luck when it came to girls with bad directions. This wasn't to say that graceful Luoxian of Shushan study was weak. Her first pin status was enough to explain everything. It was just that in the top 16, she was the only physical invulnerability expert other than Run Li. Yet she was chosen. Of course, even so, Lu Qing didn't think highly of Run Li, who was obviously weaker. Amidst his thoughts, he heard his name, following which his opponent surfaced. Wuyue Club Huangke. Spear King Huangke. Is this intentional? First Long Zhen, then the Spear King. Is the organizing committee purposely creating a gimmick? Lu Qing couldn't help but criticize silently. This matchup had too many backstories for the media to play with. Wuyue Club's actual leader vs a rising star who left Wuyue Club out of anger, due to being oppressed by different factions. How much blood, tears, and hatred were written on the paper when these words were typed out. As a physical invulnerability expert who had won 6 titles, Spear King Huangke was definitely one of the best. In Lu Cheng's opinion, at his peak, he was no weaker than Heaven's equal sword Fengji. The reason why he wasn't listed as one of the 8 mighty ones was because at 49 years old, he was almost 50 years old. Although his spirit hadn't deteriorated yet, it was inevitable that his recovery speed would slow down. Therefore, just like Empress Luo, Ning Zitong, and the rest, he consciously reduced the number of times he participated in the title matches. He only gave it his all twice a year to maintain his condition. Unfortunately, he had bad luck. In the last 4 times, he had either met the Warrior Sage, the Dragon King, or fought Dongbaxian and the rest in advance. He had always awkwardly stayed out of the top 8. In the various evaluations that were based on results, it was inevitable that he would be neglected. Furthermore, Clown Gu Jianxi seemed to have been stimulated by his rapid growth, and was showing signs of a second spring. Lu Qing didn't dare to underestimate him. In the hotel where Wuyue Club was staying, Huangke, who had a wide forehead and a dull face, stood on the balcony and looked at the lights of the thousands of houses. When the results of the draw reached his ears, he tilted his head slightly and looked leisurely at the suite on his left. It belonged to the clown, Gu Jianxi. As far as his eyes could see, it was pitch black. There was no sound or movement, but Huangke believed that Gu Jianxi was inside. Compared to Lu Cheng, his rapid growth seemed so ordinary. As the thought flashed through his mind, Huangke retracted his gaze, lowered his hands, and turned to enter the living room. He glanced at the 3.8 tall ice chi spear, picked up the phone, dialed a number and instructed, "Send me the videos of Lu Cheng's last 30 matches." Yes. The person on the other end answered respectfully. He quickly turned on the computer and copied one of the videos from the folder he had already created. His daily job was to update this database every day. Before sending it, he carefully reviewed it and didn't find any problems. He just felt that one match was missing, but he couldn't pinpoint which one. Retracting his thoughts, Lu Qing lowered his head and discussed the draw with Yan Zheke, Kai Zhongming, and his senior sister. He also diverted his attention to the remaining 3 matches. King of Swords Wu Qiao versus Taoist Yin Yan. Empress Luo Ning Zitong versus Late Night Light Liang Yifan. Clown Gu Jianxi versus Living Buddha, Shi Shan. After the draw ended, Yan Zheke returned to her studies. Lu Qing rubbed his tummy. Feeling slightly hungry, he got up and went out in search of supper with his phone but not his wallet. After eating his fill and showing off for a while, he strolled back leisurely. He saw Empress Luo stirring the liquid in a cup with a small silver spoon in the hotel lobby's open cafe. "Come, I'll treat you to something." Ning Zitong also noticed him. She smiled sweetly and greeted him. Although there was a distance between them, and her voice wasn't loud, Lu Qing heard it clearly. Let me treat. Otherwise, my master will scold me for being impolite. Lu Qing pushed the responsibility to Gizershur. Ning Zitong laughed out loud. Why would he say something like that? I've met someone who understands my master. This is King awkward. Lu Qing laughed dryly and sat opposite her. Without waiting for him to speak again, Ning Zitong added with a smile. This is for your victory over Feng Ji. Don't reject it. Sister Ning, I know you have a grudge with Ren Li's master, but you don't have to vent your anger on the entire Kongtong school. Heaven's equal sword is innocent. Women's grudges are so complicated. Lu Qing thought to himself and nodded in amusement. Then I'll accept your invitation. After ordering the drinks, Ning Zitong asked with interest, Did you just come back from outside? Are you feeling uneasy, because you drew Spear King? Hey, don't be so nosy. Lu Qing thought as he shook his head. No, I'm just hungry. To me, the Ice God sect is a distant existence, not to mention the Wuyue Club. I'm not interested in their internal grudges. I'm quite happy that I drew Spear King. He has been immersed in the unique skills of the Ice sect for 20 to 30 years. He can help me better understand my shortcomings in this aspect. Ning Zitong sighed in disappointment. Boring. She retracted her expression and changed the topic. You haven't been out since last night. What are you doing cooped up in your room? Lu Qing smiled and said, I'm rewatching the battle videos of my previous 30 to 40 matches. I'm examining every detail and looking for possible problems. Ning Zitong was stunned for a moment before nodding slowly. That's a good habit. Ever since I got the title, I feel like I've reached the pinnacle of control over myself. I've been neglecting self-examination. At this point, she laughed self-deprecatingly. And there's another problem. If I were to rewatch the battle videos of the past, I'm afraid I'll often think, I was so young and beautiful in the past. How could I perform so well? It's so elegant. How did I do it back then? Compared to now, it's like harming the soul. Who knew Empress Luo was such a narcissist? Lu Qing found it funny and didn't know how to respond. Fortunately, Ning Zitong was just speaking out of impulse. She quickly pulled the topic back on track and said with a smile, I thought you'd be a little arrogant after defeating Feng Ji. I didn't expect you to maintain your composure so well. Sister Ning, I know myself best. I'm only at the level of a first pin at most. I'm not at the superclass level, so how can I look down on the Spear King? Lu Qing replied with a smile. Relying on the special combination of cultivation and martial arts, he was able to consolidate his foundation in the physical invulnerability stage, and gain the strength of a weak second pin immediately after learning many secret arts. Then, after a few life-and-death battles and hard work in the laboratory, he improved his mastery of the cosmic universe style, and mastered many physical invulnerability kung fu, coupled with his understanding of the forbidden sect divine kung fu, which gave him an advantage in terms of mental strength. His overall strength had transformed, and he finally touched the threshold of a first pin. Ning Zitong shook her head with a smile. Don't underestimate yourself. In the physical invulnerability stage, the improvement of strength is directly related to the refinement of the mind. In this aspect, you've combined cultivation and the 9 words formula. You're blessed by the heavens. In my opinion, what you're lacking compared to us is maturity and purity. What you're lacking is how to incorporate your unique understanding into your moves. As the mind was refined step by step, the martial artist would gradually come into contact with the mysterious and dangerous head area. When it reaches a qualitative change, it would be taboo. The difficulties and obstacles in between couldn't be described in words. Sister Ning, do you have a trick? Lu Qing couldn't hide his curiosity. Trick. The trick is to transform your understanding, experience, and feelings into a state of mind. To use the mind to present it. This is my personal opinion. You can ask your master. Ning Zitong didn't hide anything. Lu Qing recalled his battle with the god-slaying saber, Lu Yongyuan, and the living Buddha's Pure Land illusion. He had a vague idea of what was going on. He pondered and said, "Isn't it possible to put it in a different way? You can combine your understanding of the laws of nature and your most sensitive emotions with your main body and express them through your mind to influence your opponent? It's a higher-level application of a clash of auras and will?" Ning Zitong thought for a few seconds and said, "Something like that. An important part of it is to tap into the strength in your heart, the strength that has supported you to this point. This is my forte." Lu Cheng recalled his journey to this point. The past was vivid in his mind, especially the fall at the bottom. It made this strength even clearer and more explosive. For love and for me. Protect your feelings, protect your family, and protect yourself. At this thought, Lu Cheng's expression suddenly became a little strange. If I were to incorporate these feelings into my moves and present them through the mind, wouldn't it be? "What's wrong with you?" Ning Zitong asked, puzzled. "Nothing." Lu Cheng smiled perfunctorily. "I suddenly thought of a big move from a comic. Super Invincible I Love You." Chapter 721. A day later, the flames of Warrior Sage battle reignited. Jiwon Stadium welcomed the round of 16. In the first match, Dragon King and Ji-hai fought like Mars colliding with Earth. The former, who wasn't injured, displayed terrifying dominance, proving once again that the era of the legendary twins was far from over. However, to be able to obtain 2 titles within 5 years of reaching the physical invulnerability stage, Ji-hai wasn't a cheater. With the strength of the unshaken body of the Wisdom King and the perseverance of an ascetic monk, he made the Dragon King, Chen Qitao, pay a certain price. While the audience cheered, Lu Cheng was speechless. In the next 3 matches, Kirin Dongbaxian didn't let Dragon King dominate. After a fierce battle, he narrowly defeated the sect leader of Black Tortoise Sect, Long Dike that protects the sea, Ma Xinghong, who was also a titled Mighty One. Lu Yongyuan's saber skills had reached perfection, and he lived up to his reputation of being strong when facing strong opponents. He defeated the previous record holder, Queen of Thought, Fei Dan. Currently, the top 3 titles are Warrior Sage Qian Donglu, Queen of Thought Fei Dan, and Taoist Sword Wu Qiao. Dragon King Chen Qitao is only ranked 4th for now, but there's only 1 or 2 titles between them. It's only a matter of time before he catches up with the 2 seniors. His only target is Qian Donglu. Ren Li's good luck didn't last long against the first pin Mighty One, Luo Xian. After all, there was still a big gap between their strength. In terms of the bet, even if Lu Cheng lost the match, he would still be considered to have lasted longer. After 4 of the top 8 were decided, Lu Cheng, who was sitting on the sofa in the resting room, stretched his neck and stood up slowly. Amid the crackling sounds of his bones and tendons, Yen Zhika replied. Hands on chest, nodding expression. "Your personal cheerleader is in position." It was the weekend, and she didn't have anything else to do. She could stay at home and watch the live stream without worrying about her performance. "Why does it feel like I'm replenishing my energy?" Lu Cheng chuckled and replied to Yen Zhika teasingly. Then he locked his screen and walked out. Almond was already waiting for him. She took his phone, wallet, and other belongings from him. Lu Cheng walked towards the exit unhurriedly. There was no door, only a gorgeous shed, as though it was announcing the identity of every person who walked out. At the edge, Lu Cheng stopped, closed his eyes, and allowed his mind to enter his body. It was a subtle and indescribable feeling. He seemed to be looking at the root pulp. It was the smallest and most basic unit that made up the internal organs, flesh, and other things. It was densely packed and there was nothing missing. The moment Lu Cheng saw this scene, they came to life in an instant, stretching out and showing their existence. They were countless fireflies, forming a world of their own inside, a miniature universe with dark, deep, and starry specks hidden within. They hummed softly, swayed, and stirred each other, gathering the tides of life. Lu Cheng could hear the faint sound of gushing into his mind. It was vigorous, strong, secretive, and thick. After discussing the issue of heat control with Ning Zitong, Lu Cheng consulted his master, and had a preliminary understanding of it. However, if he wanted to truly grasp this point and turn it into his own strength, he would need at least a few months or even a year to do so. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry to succeed. He merely digested what he had learned in the previous matches and adjusted his state of mind. Using the momentum accumulated from his consecutive victories against strong opponents, at this moment, he felt his mind and spirit were perfect. Naturally, he could see and hear the resonance of his root pulp. Other than some residual injuries and his body not at its peak, there was nothing else that could be better. Lu Qing took a deep breath and smelled the scent of battle. He opened his eyes slowly and stepped out of the exit. He passed through the shed and stepped into the competition grounds. Lu Qing. Cheers surged, as if welcoming a new king. Lu Qing, Huang Ke, who had also stopped in the inner part of the shed, listened to the roaring cheers outside. There was no change of emotion on his wooden face. Compared to when he was young, his temper was much better now. It had been a long time since he had the urge to destroy. Since he was young, Huang Ke was the kind of dog that didn't bark but would bite. He was usually silent and inflexible with words. He seemed like an honest and nice guy. However, once he was provoked and his anger accumulated to a certain extent, he would explode uncontrollably. He would really beat people to death and destroy things beyond repair. If he hadn't dropped out of school right after he started practicing martial arts, and had a powerful teacher to look after him, the grass on his grave would have been 3 feet tall. This also affected his progress in his realm. It was only when he gradually got control of his temper that he transformed into an inhuman. From then on, he embarked on the path of the Spear King. When the cheers outside subsided, Huang Ke walked out slowly. He happened to step on the critical moment when the atmosphere changed, causing the cheers of Lu Qing to pause. He had carefully analyzed the past 30 matches of his opponents. The first conclusion he came up with was that the biggest problem of those who were stronger than Lu Qing but lost to him was that they didn't adopt the right attitude. Although they took him seriously and gave their all, they still fought with a strong performance. They still treated their opponent as the weaker party and didn't leave any leeway. Once an accident happened or they made a mistake, it was easy for them to fall into a difficult situation. Long Zhen, the god-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan, was a typical example. When fighting Lu Qing, they had to lower their attitude and treat him as an enemy of the same level, or even stronger. The Heaven's Equal Sword Fengji did well in this aspect. If he hadn't been so confident in his flight, and made the fatal mistake of being careless, the outcome would have been different. The situation before the aerial battle was sufficient to prove this point. After examining himself and confirming that there were no similar problems, Huang Ke held the ice chi spear upside down and placed the pole behind his back. He slowly walked to the predetermined position and looked up at his opponent. He had a neat and clean buzz cut, a pair of sparkling eyes, a well-defined silhouette, and a deep and dark navy blue martial arts suit. He seemed to be in harmony with the outside world, yet seemed to be a world of his own. Together, they outlined a martial artist who would never bend or admit defeat. In Lu Cheng's eyes, the dull and ordinary Huang Ke wasn't as eye-catching as the astonishingly long ice chi spear. It was as tall as 2 people, and the pole was made of a special silver alloy. The tip of the spear shone with a cold and crystalline light. The entire spear trembled slightly in the wind, giving the impression that it was breathing in and out. It was as though it wasn't a weapon, but a sleeping dragon with a life of its own. The referee started the conversation at the right time. The usually dull Huang Ke opened his mouth and said in a low voice, "I thought this day would come, but I didn't expect it to come so soon." After Lu Qing reached physical invulnerability, it was only a matter of time before they met. No one would find it strange. But who would have thought that in less than a year, his opponent would stand opposite him as a superclass? Hearing this, Lu Qing, whose heart was calm, smiled faintly and said, "Me too." Huang Ke didn't say anything else. It was as though he had turned into an ice sculpture. However, the surrounding temperature dropped rapidly. The fog thinned and snowflakes fell, creating a chilly and somber atmosphere in the early summer of May. If it had been someone weaker, they would have shivered uncontrollably and lost the will to fight. Darkness suddenly appeared around Lu Qing. It was hazy and silent. No ripples could be seen. Then, a cold wind blew out from the dense fog. It whimpered and filled the air with bitter coldness. The referee, who was about to leave, felt that the snowflakes had hidden sharpness, as though they would stab him at any time. This was a battle between the coldness of the ice chi and the coldness of the starry sky. In the face of Huang Ke's oppressive aura, Lu Qing didn't use the fire sect that countered it. He didn't gather the 5 flames and create the flame realm. This was because when he reviewed his recent matches and recalled his past battles, he had a habit of forming the 5 flames first when facing a strong opponent. He relied on the uniqueness of the cosmic universe style to maintain the balance and prepare in advance. This was his own advantage, so of course he had to make full use of it. However, the problem was that if it became a habit and a starting move that he didn't change at all, it would be easy for others to target him and counter him with methods he didn't think of beforehand. In the previous battle with Long Zhen, he had suffered because of this. If it wasn't for his opponent's impatience and confidence, which led to him using the 9 words formula, things would have been completely different. Therefore, he had to take the initiative to change and not leave behind a pattern. Of course, he couldn't change for the sake of change. That would be an even more serious mistake. He had to change according to the situation and the situation. When clashing with the coldness, the darkness of the universe was equally suitable. Pieces of goose feathers fluttered in the wind, getting more and more urgent. Just as the bleakness and coldness reached its peak, the referee in the distance shouted, "Begin!" Bam! Huang Ke was the first to move. He didn't charge straight at Lu Qing. Instead, he swung his body, stirring up the wind and snow, as though he was roaming and waiting for an opportunity. He lowered his posture. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The wind whistled. Amidst the white haze, Lu Qing turned his back and used his footwork. He didn't stay in the same spot, but instead took the initiative. Bam bam bam. The strong wind was biting cold. Huang Ke and Lu Qing were like navies in the era of battleships. They constantly changed their positions, searching for the best angle and opportunity to attack. Bam! After many twists and turns, a vast expanse of white snow suddenly covered Lu Qing from head to toe. Just as it approached, an aurora suddenly emerged from within. Fast, accurate, ruthless. Light, cold illusion. Chapter 722. A speck of aurora went straight for Lu Cheng's throat like a star. The rest of the body was vigorous and sparkling. It was hard and soft at the same time, as though it could change directions at any moment. Lu Cheng lowered his center of gravity and stopped in his tracks. He pushed his feet inward, shook his right arm, and threw a punch at the tip of the spear. A thick layer of ice appeared on the surface of his fist. Clang! Only then did the body of the spear straighten abruptly. The power flowed through the joints, and the chill materialized. The sharpness of the spear seemed to be able to pierce through everything. It pierced Lu Cheng's fist, shattering the layer of ice and sinking straight in. It gave off a feeling of invincibility. Kacha! Kacha! The sound of shattering rang out at the same time. The spear tip gradually slowed down under the layers of ice. Strangely, the closer it got to Lu Cheng's fist, the thinner the layer of ice became. After an instant, the spear seemed to be shuttling through a void that wasn't cold at all. At the end of the void was tumbling flames, a fluid that resembled magma. It heated the tip of the spear red and melted the ice force. Within a single punch, the starry sky shrunk and the combination of ice and fire. This was Lu Cheng's cosmic flow. After half a year of polishing, his mastery in this aspect had improved to a whole new level. He was now on par with Spear King Huang Ke. Huang Ke's expression was still wooden, but his eyes seemed to reflect the midday sun, glowing with a strange light. He pressed and swung the spear with his palms, and the ice-hornless serpent immediately bounced up and broke away from contact. The tip of the spear that had been repeatedly forged and polished reflected the radiance from the dome of Jiuwen Stadium. It was like a vertical eye that stared coldly at Lu Cheng. Then the tip of the spear spun, shaking out a snowstorm that filled the sky. Dozens of illusions were shaken, and 7 or 8 specks of ice radiance enveloped the opponent from above. This was a combination of snowstorm and aurora, the masterpiece of Spear King Huang Ke. Facing this, Lu Cheng suddenly lowered his back and took a step diagonally, dodging a few of the cold glints that whizzed down. Following that, he retracted his right foot and spun his body back, narrowly dodging the remaining glints. At the same time, He swelled his arms and swung out a fist. With his palm empty, he seemed to be grasping at the tip of the spear that had lost its momentum. Lu Cheng's fingers spread open and was about to grab the shaft below the tip of the spear. Huang Ke lowered his back and raised. Xiao Yuan enlarged. The long spear twisted wildly, sticking to Lu Cheng's palm with great elasticity and rolling towards his body, just like the scene when a window was opened in the dead of winter. If Lu Cheng had used a weapon, Huang Ke's ice chi would have made his weapon fly out of his hand. But now his goal was to break Lu Cheng's arm and attack his right chest, spreading the wind and snow. He hit the body of the spear precisely. The shaft bent, and the twisting was interrupted. Then he lowered his body. Light blue flames spurted out from his back. He closed in on his opponent and threw a punch at his lower abdomen. When fighting with an enemy with a long weapon, closing the distance was the most effective way to win. In a small area, in close quarters combat, a weapon like a spear was a burden. Huang Ke didn't show any sign of disappointment. The ice chi spear retracted as if it had a life of its own. His hands were near the middle of the spear. Bam! He swung his arm. The exposed end of the spear whipped at Lu Cheng's fist like a bronze mace. Bam! Sparks and ice shards flew. Huang Ke used the rebounding force of the end of the spear to push the tip of the spear forward. Like lightning, he slashed at the enemy's face, forcing him to switch from offense to defense. Then he took advantage of the situation to use his spear techniques. He pointed, stabbed, rushed, whipped, twisted, and flicked. Using the leveraging technique of Blizzard Storm, he made the wind blow stronger and stronger, and the snow fall more and more fiercely. He firmly suppressed Lu Cheng, just like how Lu Cheng used 24 blizzard strikes when he was in the body refining stage. Lu Cheng's emotions were as cold as ice. Although he was at a disadvantage, he didn't panic at all. He threw out precise punches and kicks, alternating between retreating and attacking. He defended steadily. But this spear technique was like 24 blizzard strikes. Once used to its fullest extent, it would become faster and stronger until it overwhelmed the enemy. Simply defending wouldn't work. Of course, Lu Cheng wouldn't just wait for death. Between parrying and dodging, he punched with ice spirit and kicked with frost force. With the help of his way of balance, he quietly accumulated fire force in his body until it reached a certain limit. For other physical invulnerability experts, this was unimaginable. It was like accumulating rage points by getting beaten up in a game. After 30 to 40 seconds, Lu Cheng's eyes turned cold. His arms swelled, covered by a layer of faint purple. With a bang, his fist met the tip of the spear. The hidden fire force was ready to be unleashed. Just as the two were about to come into contact, Huang Ke suddenly pressed on the end of the spear, causing the tip to shoot up into the sky. Lu Cheng's fist missed. A feint? Leftover force? He, the great spear king, actually has leftover force in his every move against me? Lu Cheng's eyes narrowed. He couldn't retract his fist and hit the empty space in front of him. Boom! The sea of flames surged and billowed. Huang Ke took advantage of the 4-meter distance between him and Lu Cheng to turn his back and dodge the attack. Then he used the mesmerizing snow steps to circle around Lu Cheng's flank. Once again he executed his spear art. Thousands of shadows of the saber lashed out, and sharp snowflakes with hidden sharpness blew. Pa! Pa! Huang Ke turned gentleness into toughness. His spear shadows burned the sky, forcing Lu Cheng to defend bitterly. A certain unknown commentator gasped when he saw this. When a titled expert also uses such a wretched style of fighting, things will become difficult. Don't be afraid of experts fighting face to face. Be afraid of experts acting like hooligans. If Cheng's strange move had hit him, he would have had a good chance of taking advantage of the situation to launch a combo attack. Even if he couldn't win, he could have turned the situation around and gained the upper hand. However, his opponent was always on the lookout for accidents. His counterattack would only bring him further disadvantage. Everyone be prepared. This may be a long tug-of-war. Those who need to go to the toilet, go to the toilet. Those who need to eat snacks, eat snacks. Those who have something to do, go do it first, said Little Ming. Bam! Bam! The wind and snow around Lu Cheng pierced his bones. If it weren't for the fact that he was considered a physical invulnerability expert of the ice sect, and often trained in laboratories, even with the protection of the fire force in his body, he would have gradually stiffened and weakened. This was the main fighting style of the ice sect. The cold needed time to show its ferocity. Just as he was trying his best to hold on and find a way to escape, the spear shadows in front of him suddenly disappeared. Not only did the spear shadows disappear, but so did the wind and snow. Not only that, but Huang Ke also disappeared. All his aura, all his senses, all disappeared. Lu Cheng's eyes vaguely reflected Huang Ke, who had put his spear behind his back. He seemed to have gathered all his accumulated aura, and everything about him into a single point. An extremely dangerous premonition suddenly emerged from the bottom of his heart. Lu Cheng followed his instincts and the judgment he had internalized during this period of time. He didn't dodge to the left or right, nor did he roll on the ground. The front of his clothes were torn, and light blue gas spurted out, pushing him back at high speed. World-shaking spear. Huang Ke's world-shaking spear. The world-shaking spear that he had relied on to win the title of king. Thanks to the flexibility of the spear body and the special technique of using force, it could change direction midway without reducing its power. Dodging was equivalent to self-destructing. Just as Lu Cheng's body landed, a cold light flashed before his eyes and shot towards him. It carried an incomparable aura, like a snowy mountain that had been accumulating for millions of years suddenly collapsing. It surged mightily, engulfing and destroying everything. If God or Buddha stood in its way, it would kill God or Buddha. Stripped of its external appearance, this was actually the mega avalanche of the body refining state. However, when used by Huang Ke, no one would think of it as a low-end martial art. To be more precise, Huang Ke's derivation of this move had reached a terrifying level, because it was exactly the same as his own will and personality. Silent, reserved and calm. When the accumulation reached its limit, the slightest fluctuation would immediately cause an explosion that could destroy the world. It was cold and resolute. Therefore, he had honed this move for many years and improved the technique, perfectly integrating it with his spirit. A world-shaking man, a world-shaking spear. Only in Huang Ke's hands did the mega avalanche have a soul. Even the Dragon King and Warrior Sage had to avoid it. Lu Cheng felt a piercing coldness in his throat. His retreat couldn't compare to the cold light and the turbulent snow tide that was chasing him. The shadow instantly enveloped him, circulating his qi and blood. He activated the attainment formula and sped up his retreat like a ghost. However, the distance between him and the mega avalanche didn't increase. On the contrary, it was steadily shrinking, albeit at a slower pace. Taking advantage of this lightning-fast moment, Lu Cheng raised his hands and clasped them together. Covered in thick frost, he clamped the tip of the spear without missing a hair's breadth. Slash. Crack. The sound overlapped. The tip of the spear, stained with blood, drilled out like an unstoppable ice dragon, piercing towards the throat of the enemy who was inches away. The only difference was that its speed had slowed down and its sharpness wasn't as sharp as before. Lu Cheng used all his means but still couldn't avoid or block this world-shaking spear. Bam. At the last moment, his qi and blood swelled, his muscles bulged, his fascia stretched, and his bones moved. His entire body suddenly grew taller and wider. The spear that had chased him for a long time and penetrated his palms couldn't change direction in time. Due to the change in his opponent's figure, it didn't manage to pierce his throat. Instead, it pierced his left shoulder, above his collarbone, and came out from his back. After racking his brains, Lu Cheng finally managed to preserve his combat strength under this world-shaking spear. Blood flowed out and quickly froze into ice. Enduring the pain, he wriggled his shoulder muscles and clamped the tip of the spear. He clenched his hands into fists and punched the body of the spear that was inches away. He wanted to use the internal explosion force to destroy the structure of the spear and reduce the feeling of being one with Huang Ke. He didn't want to interrupt his opponent because a spear that was short was still a spear. At this critical moment, Huang Ke loosened his right hand and spun his left hand that was holding the end of the spear. The spear suddenly turned into a spiral drill and bounced off Lu Cheng's fists, tearing apart the muscles above his shoulders. Seeing the ice dragon break free from its restraints and soar into the air, blood splattering everywhere, Lu Cheng, who was calmly sensing his surroundings with the ice heart, suddenly fell into a trance due to the pain. However, this trance was instantly suppressed and the deity above his head regained consciousness. The outline of the drops of blood appeared. Each drop contained countless root pulps. Lu Cheng seemed to have returned to the moment before the start of the competition, when his body and mind were lively and resonated with his root pulps. He felt his connection with the external blood rapidly weakening. At this moment, his heart skipped a beat and his spirit surged. Using the connection that was about to disappear, he made the remaining ice force in the tiny root pulps in the blood spurt out. The drops of blood turned into ice, either dancing in the air or sticking to the ice chi spear. At this moment, the connection between Lu Cheng's spirit and the external blood had completely disappeared. He could no longer control it. However, as the smallest unit of the miniaturized universe, when the root pulps lost the ice spirit, the balance was broken. The remaining Emperor Yin naturally erupted. Rumble! The root pulps spurted out, and the blood exploded. The crimson staining the ice chi spear disintegrated and burned like a bag of dynamite. Buzz! The spear trembled violently and let out a painful cry. The tremor spread towards Huang Ke's palms and tore the web between his thumb and forefinger. With the attainment formula, Lu Cheng took a step forward and closed the distance. His right fist shot towards his opponent like a cannonball. "Victory or defeat?" shouted Kai Zhongming anxiously. At this moment, Huang Ke probably wouldn't be able to control the ice chi spear with ease. Just as everyone was holding their breaths, Huang Ke unexpectedly let go of his palms and let the spear fall to the ground. He spread his arms and swung them fiercely. His fists were hard and violent. The Spear King's punches and kicks weren't any weaker than an ordinary physical invulnerability expert. Bam, bam, bam. Lu Cheng seemed to have been hit by the blizzard. With his left shoulder injured, his movements were affected and he couldn't suppress his opponent's attacks. Unable to form a combo, he could only take a few steps back and put some distance between them. Using the ice spirit to seal his wound, he relied on what he learned from the disabled period before he reached physical invulnerability, to forcefully regain control. Huang Ke kicked the ice chi spear that was about to hit the ground and grabbed the spear again. The situation was back to how it was before. Phew, this is what a mighty one with a title should be like, sighed Little Ming regretfully. Even if he encountered an unexpected situation or made a mistake, he would still be able to escape from a dangerous situation and regain his composure. When facing a weaker opponent, the God-slaying saber did a very bad job in this aspect. Clang! Huang Ke brandished his long spear, and the battle continued. Lu Cheng continuously changed between mesmerizing steps of wind and snow and wheels of wind and fire to prevent Huang Ke from gaining momentum. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. The two occasionally exchanged blows and occasionally separated. They wandered around the arena, causing the white snowflakes to fall to the ground. Throughout this process, Lu Cheng was always at a disadvantage. However, he was always able to create opportunities to counterattack, causing Huang Ke quite a bit of trouble. If it had been anyone else, the slightest bit of carelessness would have led to the tables being turned. Unfortunately, Huang Ke's heart was as cold as before. He didn't change his stance at all. He would rather make mistakes than take risks. Lu Cheng's 7 or 8 counterattacks were all ruthlessly extinguished. As the minutes and seconds passed, Huang Ke was secretly shocked. He didn't expect Lu Cheng to be able to hold on for so long under his style of fighting. Furthermore, Lu Cheng didn't repeat any of the habits and problems he had shown in the previous 30 matches. Huang Ke, who had been specially prepared, couldn't find any opportunities. His future is limitless, Huang Ke muttered to himself. Suddenly, he retracted his accumulated momentum and various senses. It was as if he had disappeared from his original spot. He was going to use the world-shaking spear move again. This time, he believed that victory was at hand because Lu Cheng had been forced to the edge of the arena. If he retreated any further, he would fall out of the arena and automatically admit defeat. If he didn't retreat, no matter how he dodged, he wouldn't be able to avoid it. He would have to think of a way to take it head-on. Once he did, he would definitely be injured. What followed would be a brutal blizzard. On the line between victory and defeat, Lu Cheng would definitely lose. Seeing this scene, Yin Zheka forgot to breathe and subconsciously covered her mouth with both hands. The rest of the audience reacted similarly. Whether it was in the Jiuwen Stadium or in front of the screen, everyone was silent. A cold light pierced through like a sign of a snowy mountain collapsing. It pierced towards Lu Cheng rapidly. The feeling of being swallowed by a white tide shrouded his heart. He suddenly squatted down and concentrated his force in his dantian. It seemed that he wanted to dodge the world-shaking spear move by squatting and pouncing. However, the world-shaking spear move wasn't that simple. With a turn of the ice dragon, the avalanche went down the slope and majestically whipped towards Lu Cheng's head. It seemed that this was the only way to fully display its power. Within Lu Cheng's dantian, with darkness at the bottom and radiance densely packed, 9 ancient words formed in an instant. Confrontation. Army. Fighting. Swordsman. Wholeness. Formation. Deference. Forwarding. Attainment. They gathered into one and shone brightly. Lu Cheng's squat earlier wasn't to dodge, but to buy time to execute the complete 9 words formula. This was because the Spear King opposite him was no longer the Spear King at his peak. He was almost 50 years old, and his mental strength hadn't decreased. However, his recovery wasn't as good as when he was in his prime. Even if he had reduced the number of title matches he participated in, he had still encountered strong opponents in succession. At the start of the battle, this kind of decline wasn't noticeable, and wasn't enough to affect the outcome of the battle. However, after such a long battle, and after Huang Ke had used the world-shaking spear move twice, Lu Cheng believed that Huang Ke wouldn't be able to beat his youthful and energetic self. Under this premise, using the complete 9 words formula to weaken his opponent and improve himself would have a miraculous effect. Bam! He stretched his body and the muscles on his left shoulder swelled. He faced the ice dragon spear in the opposite direction and pushed his palms forward. Silently, Huang Ke's head buzzed. He felt that there was a problem with his control of the world-shaking spear move. Usually, such an episode would be quickly suppressed. However, at this moment, his head was throbbing and his mental strength was weak. He couldn't quickly get out of this predicament. Crack! The ice crystals on Lu Cheng's left shoulder were shattered by the spear. His bones cracked inch by inch. If he hadn't lost control of the world-shaking spear move at the last moment, his shoulder would have been crushed and his body would have been severely injured. He would have been unable to stand properly, and would have been forced out of the arena. Bam! Lu Cheng turned his back. While Huang Ke was still affected by the complete 9 words formula, he threw a punch with his right fist and hit the spear shaft. Emperor Yin seeped into the spear and exploded. Boom! The ice dragon spear was sent flying with a wail. Lu Cheng took a step forward and threw a punch at Huang Ke's face. In a daze, Huang Ke made a decision. He threw away his spear and raised his arm to block. Amidst the faint sound of the explosion, Lu Cheng changed directions and circled behind Huang Ke. He flexed his muscles and leaned in with his back to Huang Ke. Bam! Huang Ke staggered forward. Half of it was to dissipate the force, and the other half to adjust. Just as he recovered, Lu Cheng closed in again. His chi and blood surged, and the fighting formula was activated. Bam! He swung his arm and punched with his right fist, hitting his opponent's forearm that was blocking in time. The explosive flame force made Huang Ke take another step back. With this step, he who had swapped positions with Lu Cheng stepped on the edge of the arena. Seeing this, Lu Cheng was like a bloodthirsty beast. He used the simplified fighting formula again, spinning around and lashing out with his leg. Huang Ke raised his leg to block, his body wobbling. Again. Lu Cheng was at the end of his rope. Many of his capillaries were ruptured. With bloodshot eyes, he used the simplified fighting formula for the 3rd time. Bam! He threw a punch with his right fist, but it was blocked by Huang Ke's crossed palms. However, the terrifying force made Huang Ke lose his footing and take 2 steps back. Huang Ke immediately knew that he was in trouble. He quickly stopped his posture and fell into a daze. Then he let out a faint sigh, as if he was lamenting that he was no longer in his prime. He was already standing outside the arena. The referee raised his right hand and announced in a low voice, Lu Cheng wins. That you're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.